The battle was devastating, leaving a trail of destruction and fallen warriors scattered across a desolate battlefield. Meanwhile, endless hordes of gigantic monsters advance, destroying everything and spreading terror wherever they go. The survivors gather in a makeshift camp before immense walls, visibly exhausted and desperate. Just then, the young man punches Tenma on the head, and Tenma complains and asks to be called Big Brother. The man smiles and introduces himself as Tenma Tsukishiro, revealing that he is only an F-rank hunter. The young Kaya Hidaka, whose powers have yet to awaken, complains about being hit by a hunter. Tenma asks what an F-rank hunter with no abilities would know about being a true elite warrior. He points toward the platform and says that a real hunter is someone like the legendary SS rank Kakaru Amamiya. It all began 20 years ago, when gates suddenly appeared and terrifying monsters started invading Earth. To confront this threat, human hunters emerged, chosen by the system to receive special powers. These legendary warriors fought bravely and managed to save all of humanity from complete extinction. Among the strongest were the final 11, who used their incredible powers to protect the human race. But the monsters had extremely powerful generals known as demons, whose strength surpassed that of the heroes. Faced with the demons' terrifying power, humanity was forced to retreat and became cornered at its final line of defense. Kakaru Amamiya sadly reveals that 6 of the final 11 have already died, and that the enemy army is advancing. The SSS rank hunter tries to keep everyone's hope alive by saying they still have one last chance to win. He reveals that there is a unique opportunity to undo this entire tragedy and change humanity's fate. One of his companions holds a mysterious golden hourglass that shines brightly before the entire crowd. The magical object begins radiating a colossal light and creates an immensely powerful portal of golden energy. This legendary item, called the Return Point, can create a portal that leads exactly 20 years into the past. However, Kakaru Amami explains that only one warrior can pass through the portal to prevent the terrible invasion. People begin wondering who the ideal choice would be to take on the mission of returning to the past. Everyone starts shouting to Karu's name, begging him to go back in time and change humanity's fate. Sitting on the ground, Kyoya tells Tenma that having the power to travel through time and fix things must be amazing. Kyoya admits that if he could go back, he would only want to see his parents' faces one more time before everything ends. Tenma listens to the boy's confession and gently places a hand on his head to comfort him. Meanwhile, the crowd continues chanting Kakaru Amamiya's name, urging him to accept the important mission. His companion looks at the leader and asks whether it is finally time for him to accept this heroic burden. She smiles and says that he is the only one strong enough to defeat the demons and save the entire world. Kakaru prepares to accept the challenge and declares that he will do everything he can to secure their future. But suddenly, Kakaru desperately shouts for everyone to dodge after noticing a surprise attack coming from the sky. A gigantic blast of dark energy descends from the heavens toward the platform, where all the leaders are gathered. The huntress quickly tries to use her barrier powers to protect everyone from the deadly assault. The devastating attack slams into the barrier with extreme violence, causing massive explosions that terrify the survivors. The impact is so powerful that the magical protection begins to shatter completely under the overwhelming force. The huntress is utterly shocked when she realizes that her powerful barrier was broken with ease. The enemy attack tears through the defenses and blows up the platform, sending debris and dust flying in every direction. A massive rock hurtles toward Kyoya and Tenma as they watch the destruction unfold right before their eyes. Desperate, Tenma shoves Kyo away with all his strength to save him from being crushed. Kyo is thrown through the air and reaches toward Tenma as the enormous rock comes crashing down. The young man screams in panic while Tenma gives him a calm smile and bids his companion a heroic farewell. The enormous rock strikes the ground with a devastating crash, raising a cloud of smoke and burying the hunter. Kyoya falls to the ground in despair and cries when he realizes that his friend just sacrificed himself to save his life. He runs toward the rebel, shouting Tenma's name with tears in his eyes and praying for a miracle. Amid the dust and destruction, the young man desperately calls out to the hunter trapped beneath the rocks. Though injured under the rebel, Tenma smiles and struggles to tell Kyoya to call him Big Brother. Suddenly, a gigantic golden light begins shining intensely around Tenma. As he lies on the ground, a system window appears before him, warning that the temporal distortion in space will now be corrected. The system announces that the legendary return point has been activated and has begun the regression process. The portal consumes Tenma, and the system confirms that the F-rank hunter will return 20 years into the past. The colossal beam of light quickly begins to shrink until it vanishes completely, leaving everyone nearby confused. The smoke slowly begins to clear, revealing only the wreckage left behind by the enemy's devastating attack. Desperate, the huntress looks around and asks, who managed to enter the portal back through time? Kakeru Amamiya is utterly stunned when he realizes the plan failed, and the chosen hero did not enter the portal. Meanwhile, red system alerts warn of causal distortions and a forced correction in 30 minutes. Tenma realizes that he entered the portal, but worries that a weak hunter like him will never be able to stop the demons. The system window confirms the regression success, revealing that Tenma is still level 2 and F rank. He realizes he truly went back in time when he sees his old stats floating right before his eyes. The hunter slowly gets to his feet, trying to understand what point in the past he has reincarnated into this time. Suddenly, a loud growl echoes through the forest, startling Tenma and immediately drawing his attention. He quickly runs toward the mysterious sound to find out what is happening nearby. Hidden behind a tree, the protagonist spots a group of armed goblins roaming through the dense forest. Tenma realizes he is inside a hunting gate, but grows irritated that mere common monsters still frighten him. With no special combat ability, he wonders how he will find the exit and survive. The system displays a warning that just over 24 minutes remain before the time limit expires. Hunter continues watching the goblins when he suddenly sees a gleaming blade rushing toward the creatures. The small green monsters scream in despair when they sense an overwhelming and lethal danger approaching. In a fraction of a second, the mysterious creature slices every goblin in half with swift, precise attacks. A monster's head rolls near Tenma, who watches in terror and tries not to make a sound. He assumes there is another hunter in the dungeon and considers asking for help, so they can escape together. However, he comes face to face with the dark silhouette of a terrifying creature wielding a large, blood-stained sword. The protagonist recognizes the fearsome combat technique and realizes that the enemy is the dreaded Chulane. This elite monster is an extremely dangerous entity, notorious among hunters for its cruelty. Desperate, the young man wonders why this creature, which has killed so many warriors, is inside such a weak gate. Another warrior races desperately through the forest, shouting that someone is killing humans and monsters indiscriminately. The fleeing hunter runs straight into the legendary monster, which appears before him radiating a terrifying aura of death. Tenma watches from hiding and panics when he realizes the danger is far greater than he imagined. The terrifying monster raises its gigantic sword and prepares to deliver a fatal blow to the defenseless warrior. Showing no mercy, the enemy launches a devastating attack aimed at slicing through the fleeing man's neck. At that instant, Tenma rushes in and shoves the other hunter aside, saving him from the deadly strike. The creature's attack hits the ground with such force that it opens a huge crater and destroys everything nearby. The two go tumbling across the ground as the rescued young man groans in pain and tries to understand who saved him. Tenma is left breathless and terrified by the absurd power of the attack that nearly wiped them both out at once. The hunter reaches for the fallen warrior and arrests him firmly, helping him get back on his feet as quickly as possible. He desperately shouts for them to run immediately, before the monster recovers and attacks again. The monster slams the ground with a crushing blow, as the two sprint through the dense woods. The enraged creature roars when it realizes its prey managed to escape its initial attack. The two keep running without stopping until Tenma's companion says that he needs to rest for a moment. Tenma collapses in exhaustion, realizing that the poor stamina of his old F-rank body has left him in a pathetic state. He takes a deep breath as he tries to recover and focuses on the details of the rescued hunter's clothing. Tenma notices an emblem engraved on his ally's gear and is horrified to recognize the crest of the Black Raven Guild. The other hunter confirms it and reveals that his guild was supposed to have fully secured that gate. The protagonist panics when he realizes he is at the exact site of a famous massacre from the past. He remembers that the entire Black Raven Guild was brutally wiped out by a legendary monster during that tragic event. With his heart pounding, he grasps the severity of the situation and knows he must find a way out immediately. Tenma asks his companion whether he has a spare weapon so the two can fight and try to escape together. His ally says he does and begins accessing his virtual system inventory to look for an extra piece of equipment. But before he can do anything, a blade suddenly appears and destroys the young man's status window. The young hunter is completely paralyzed and confused, unable to understand what just struck his body. A blood-stained sword cuts through the young man as the spare weapon slips from his lifeless hand onto the forest grass. Tenma acts quickly and manages to grab his fallen companion's sword to defend himself from the terrifying enemy attack. The goblin monster leaps with incredible speed, bringing an extremely dangerous vertical strike down toward Tenma. He manages to block the impact with the blade, but the enemy's overwhelming strength makes him groan in pain as he resists. The violent blow sends Tenma flying backward and dragging across the forest floor for several yards. He slams hard into the trunk of a massive tree, causing leaves and branches to rain down around him from the impact. The hunter falls face down on the ground, completely drained and unable to react at that critical moment. He coughs up blood and realizes in despair that a single attack from the legendary monster nearly killed him. The enemy slowly approaches Tenma, wielding its two gleaming swords to finish the battle once and for all. At that critical moment, a system window appears and reveals that only 4 seconds remain until the protocol activates. Tenma watches the countdown numbers change rapidly. Unable to understand the meaning of the red messages, he bitterly laments that he managed to return to the past, only to be taken out so quickly and humiliatingly. The protagonist feels useless and cries in frustration, knowing that someone as weak as him could never change the future. As the countdown reaches 0, tears stream down his face as he realizes humanity's last chance has ended far too soon. Suddenly, the system announces that the Deus Ex Machina protocol has been successfully executed. Adjusting the flow of time, the system window reveals that Tenma has acquired a unique EX class trait called Talentless Adjustment. The system informs him that his skill acquisition rate has risen drastically, and his experience points have been multiplied. He is utterly stunned to read that his experience points have been multiplied 100,000 times all at once. Because Tenma has just taken severe damage from the enemy, the system grants him the level 1 resistance skill. With the 100,000 times multiplier active, his new resistance skill begins leveling up at an absurd speed. The system notification confirms that resistance has instantly reached its maximum permitted level of 10. The hunter cries as he remembers that throughout his past life of battle, he never managed to raise even a single skill level, but now, thanks to this overpowered multiplier, he has maxed out an important ability and in the blink of an eye. Feeling the system's energy flow through his body, Tenma realizes he can move perfectly despite his injuries. The goblin attacks violently but hits only the dirt. After realizing its prey dodged in time, Tenma braces himself against his sword, with a determined gaze while examining the new messages still appearing on his screen. He reads carefully that the flow of causality has been perfectly adjusted to compensate for his complete lack of natural talent. With a slight grin, the hunter grows excited about the 100x experience multiplier he just received. He remembers Kaoya's despair and the future devastated by demons and apologizes for failing to protect him until the end. The warrior promises to use this golden opportunity to change the world's fate and see his dear friend again someday. Determined, he grips his sword and vows to use this stolen power to rewrite all of human history once and for all. Tenma takes his stance for the final battle, displaying the firm, imposing posture of a true elite combat hero. The system explains in detail that talentless adjustment increases his chances of acquiring techniques and multiplies his experience. He realizes that he gained a max-level resistance skill simply by surviving his monstrous opponent's previous attack. Gripping the sword with both hands, the warrior fills with confidence, knowing he now possesses real power to make it out alive. The goblin glares at the protagonist with pure fury, growling menacingly before launching another assault. The monster charges at impressive speed, leaping toward Tenma with both blades ready to cut through everything. Tenma reacts with extreme precision, unleashing a swift horizontal slash to intercept the relentless creature's deadly attack. He slams his blade against the goblin's swords with tremendous force, producing an intense flash that lights up the entire battlefield. The system announces that Tenma has awakened the level 1 swordsmanship skill after delivering that slash against the monster. With his gigantic experience multiplier, the hunter's swordsmanship skill instantly levels up until it reaches its limit. Feeling the drastic change in his movements, he repels the monster's airborne attack with a display of pure strength. The warrior leaps back and assumes a flawless combat stance, startling the goblin with his sudden growth. The creature retreats in confusion and anger upon realizing the previously weak human has suddenly become a truly dangerous opponent. Tenma watches in amazement as a system notification informs him that his swordsmanship technique reached its maximum level within seconds. He reflects that an ordinary hunter would have to train hard for years to achieve what he gained in a single instant of battle. As he grips the sword's handle, he notices that the weapon's weight feels different, and his combat stance comes far more naturally now. The sound of slicing wind echoes through the forest, signaling that the goblin enemy is about to unleash its full speed once again. The monster leaps once more, enveloped in intense light as it prepares a decisive aerial strike to cut off the hunter's head. Tenma raises his sword in time to block the violent frontal impact, while feeling the fury and weight of the enemy's attack bearing down on him. The collision of their weapons creates a devastating boom in the middle of the forest, sending dust and rocks flying everywhere. A new system window announces that max-level resistance and level 10 Swordsmith have activated at the same time. Tenma screams with all his strength, gathering every ounce of determination to withstand the goblin's brutal attack. With a quick movement, he manages to deflect and counterattack, sending the monster flying with the force of his sword. The goblin lands on its feet in the distance, while Tenma quickly retreats, sliding across the ground to create space between them. The enemy stares mockingly at the protagonist with a sinister grin as it spins its swords with incredible skill. Tenma feels his body tremble as he realizes the enormous gap in strength and begins devising a strategy to win. Suddenly, the monster leaps and spins through the air, unleashing a series of swift, lethal attacks against the human. Tenma blocks the aerial assaults with extreme precision, but the continuous impacts rapidly drain his energy. The goblin continues its relentless barrage, forcing the hunter to concentrate completely as he reads its movements. Amid that intense focus, the system announces that Tenma has acquired the level 1 perception skill. Thanks to the 100x experience multiplier, his new perception skill instantly begins leveling up. The system emits a brilliant alert announcing that perception has successfully reached its maximum permitted level. Meanwhile, The goblin advances enveloped in a mysterious purple aura, preparing a decisive strike with both swords. But now, with his fully enhanced vision, Tenma can see the exact path of the approaching enemy attack. The protagonist is amazed to notice that his field of vision has completely changed. Allowing him to see everything in slow motion, he can predict every movement and the precise attack line of the creature descending from above, with its sharp twin swords, with perfect clarity and control. Tenma prepares his counterattack, sliding his sword at the ideal angle to intercept it. The blades collide in an explosion of energy that causes the goblin to lose its balance. After the unexpected deflection, the hunter exploits the opening to move across the battlefield at incredible speed. Leaving his opponent disoriented, Tenma marvels at the absurd power of max level perception, which lets him notice even the leaves moving in the wind. He smiles and realizes that a max level technique like this is worthy of the world's most powerful elite hunters. The goblin roars in fury when its lethal strike fails, glaring at its opponent with hatred and confusion. The creature sheathes one of its swords across its back and prepares to assume an even faster, more aggressive combat stance. The monster's eyes gleam with malice as it focuses on finding an opening to destroy the protagonist once and for all. It charges forward, tearing up the ground with its sharp claws in a swift, treacherous assault aimed at the young hunter's legs. Tenma reacts with flawless agility, leaping backward and cleanly evading the low attack. The goblin leaps after him, swinging both swords in a perfect arc of red energy to slice through the hunter. In midair, Tenma twists his body acrobatically to evade the deadly slashes that pass within inches of his clothes. He lands softly on the ground, displaying body control and balance he never possessed in his previous life. His monstrous opponent is bewildered to see that Tenma's movement left an afterimage in the air because of his speed. Despite dodging, Tenma feels his energy fading and realizes he will not be able to block every upcoming attack so easily. Thinking quickly, the hunter decides to take another nimble step backward to better position himself against the creature's charge. In the middle of that movement, the system flashes again and announces that he has just acquired the rapid movement skill. His footwork skill is also multiplied 100,000 times, instantly leveling up to its maximum limit. Now possessing maximum agility in his feet, Tenma spectacularly evades the goblin's consecutive attacks. He moves across the forest floor like a blur, while the enemy strikes nothing but air in its attempts to hit him. Tenma smiles confidently after realizing that he leaped away with surprising ease and speed. The goblin growls in irritation when it sees its prey evade its brutal attacks so easily and begins gathering more energy. The protagonist steadies himself on the ground, feeling his steps become incredibly light and agile thanks to the system's new bonuses. A new window displays his two main skills, swordsmanship and movement, at level 10, confirming his absurd increase in power. Fully confident in his abilities, Tenma charges the monster at high speed, ready to unleash his final attack. The goblin attempts a quick strike, but Tenma blocks it with pinpoint precision. Using his sword to deflect the deadly blow, the two warriors cross blades in an incredibly fast movement, creating sparks that slice through the air of the dense forest. The goblin growls in pain when it realizes that Tenma's sword left a shallow cut across its face during the rapid clash. Tenma gives it a defiant look and smirks, showing that he is now in complete control of the deadly battle. The creature leaps in fury and brings its claws down in attack, while Tenma prepares a powerful counterstrike. The violent impact of their blows echoes throughout the forest, cracking the dirt and raising an immense cloud of dust and stones. Amid the smoke, the two opponents trade rapid sword strikes, producing brilliant flashes of light with each violent collision. The goblin roars ferociously and unleashes all its energy, trying to overwhelm the hunter with increasingly brutal attacks. But the protagonist uses his max level perception and agility to flawlessly block every one of his opponent's fierce assaults. Near the dungeon entrance, a portal of blue energy shines intensely, signaling that someone is about to pass through it. A C-rank huntress named Yuna Shirigan appears, complaining over the phone about what kind of idiot would get trapped in an F-rank dungeon. She hangs up with an irritated huff, annoyed that she has to follow the association manual and carry out this unnecessary rescue. Yuna slips her phone into her jacket pocket and activates a holographic device to begin searching the dungeon. She checks the information sent by the association about the group of beginners who got lost inside that ordinary F-rank gate. Letting out a weary sigh, Yuna assumes the rookie hunters are probably drinking somewhere safe instead of actually being in danger. The C-rank huntress casts spatial teleportation magic to move quickly through the depths of the dungeon. When she arrives, Yuna finds a horrifying scene, with dozens of goblin bodies sliced apart and scattered across the ground. She is shocked by the massive amount of blood, and realizes the intruders caused a genuine massacre right near the entrance. The young woman cautiously walks through the forest, calling out to the Black Raven Guild members in hopes of finding survivors. As she proceeds, the massive destruction startles her, with enormous impact fissures torn into the ground. Yuna realizes something is terribly wrong, knowing that a battle of this magnitude should never occur in a simple F-rank dungeon. Suddenly, she spots two figures standing in the middle of a ruined clearing and decides to observe the situation carefully. She recognizes the elite goblin monster, now gravely wounded and missing an arm after the brutal battle. On the other side, the protagonist Tenma Tsukishiro stands battered but determined, gripping his blood-stained sword tightly. Yuna begins trembling in terror as she senses the creature's oppressive aura and questions whether it is truly just an ordinary goblin. The wounded monster glares at the young man with hatred and lets out a frightening growl, preparing to say something that will shock the huntress. The terrifying creature speaks to Tenma, revealing that it possesses self-awareness and superior intelligence. The elite goblin proudly reveals that its true name is Cae Chilane, making it clear that it is no ordinary monster. Yuna is utterly stunned and horrified to hear a dungeon creature communicate perfectly in human language. The warrior Cae Chilane warns that someday he will certainly repay the debt for losing this battle so humiliatingly. He raises his enormous sword toward the heavens, gathering a great amount of brilliant energy around his wounded body. With a deafening boom, the monster uses an escape skill, creating a thick smoke screen and disappearing for good. When the dust settles, Tenma Tsukishiro remains alone in the deserted clearing, struggling to breathe after the intense battle. Yuna Shirigan emerges from her hiding place, completely unable to comprehend the magnitude of the absurd events she just witnessed in that dungeon. She quickly runs toward Tenma and asks if he is all right after seeing the terrible condition of his body. The huntress introduces herself as a member of the association's rescue team and is alarmed by the severity of all his injuries. Yuna tries to calm the protagonist, urging him to hold on while asking what that mysterious goblin from earlier actually was. The young man looks at her through half-closed eyes and struggles to utter his final words before passing out. With a faint smile on his wounded face, Tenma tells the young woman that he was the one who saved her life that day. He asks her never to forget that important favor. Before his strength completely gives out, unable to remain standing, the young hunter faints and falls face first onto the forest grass, sending the woman into a panic. Yuna sighs in relief at the hospital, but grows pensive as she wonders how she will explain and report all those absurd events. Sometime later, in a silent hospital room, the ceiling lights begin to flicker softly and draw the young man's attention. Tenma Tsukishiro finally wakes from his long sleep and sits up in the hospital bed, looking around in lingering confusion. The young man walks to his room's window and looks out at the hospital courtyard, realizing that he truly survived that deadly battle. He activates the system status window, which appears floating before him with a blue glow, so he can check his new stats. Looking at the control panel, The protagonist is relieved to realize that everything he experienced in the dungeon really happened. He is impressed to see that his skill list now displays several max-level techniques acquired in a single battle. Tenma Tsukishiro confirms the fight was not merely a hallucination when he sees that his old F-rank stats remain active. The young man reflects that the only reason he could fight the legendary CE Chillane on equal footing was his overpowered bonus. He examines the description of his talentless adjustment trait, which displays the X rank and a colossal multiplier of 10 million%. The protagonist notices that the special effect of this unique system ability remains locked for some mysterious reason. Tenma understands that the gigantic experience multiplier was the system's compensation for his complete lack of natural combat talent. He wonders whether the legendary hero Kakeru Amamiya would have received such an absurd benefit if he had been chosen to return through time. But he quickly concludes that someone as powerful as Amamiya, who awakened with overwhelming strength, would never need a cheat of this magnitude. Tenma decides to set those thoughts aside and focus solely on his own journey and what he must do to save everyone's future once and for all. At that moment, the room door suddenly opens, and a familiar voice exclaims in surprise upon seeing that he has finally awakened. Untitled Gain enters the room and says the doctors estimated that the young man would take at least another full week to wake up. Tenma Tsukishiro looks thoughtfully at his own hands, remembering that he does not possess a single healing skill on his list. Tenma sees on his screen that he acquired the max-level natural recovery skill while he was unconscious. The young man realizes he gained the skill while sleeping and ends up ignoring Yuna, who irritably demands his attention. Tenma asks who she is, angering Yuna as she reminds him that they already met inside the dungeon gate. She shows him her identification, revealing herself as Untitled Gain, a C-rank association huntress who rescued him from the goblins. Tenma finally remembers that the fearsome C-Eddie Chillane fled shortly after the woman's sudden appearance. The protagonist recalls that in the original timeline, her entire investigation team would have been brutally massacred there. He says that he was actually the one who saved her life, and the reluctant young woman accepts that to some extent. Yuna explains that a survivor from the Black Raven Guild testified on his behalf and described the enemy's absurd strength. Tenma gives a faint smile, pleased to discover that someone besides him truly managed to leave the place alive. But the mood changes when she gravely says that the witness's survival has created a major problem for him. She reveals that the association decided not to officially recognize his victory over the goblin because his rank is so low. The young man walks away calmly and says that he does not care, greatly surprising the association representative. She follows in disbelief and asks whether he is not frustrated about losing a golden opportunity to become famous overnight. Tenma thinks about how the demon's true objective is to leave the gates and seize complete control of the real world. He knows he cannot draw attention to himself or allow the demons hiding on Earth to discover his true identity. He coldly says goodbye and announces that he is leaving while Yuna shouts in disbelief that he is abandoning her mid-conversation. The irritated huntress demands an explanation for why he snuck into the Black Raven Guild's gate in the first place, paying little attention to the question. The protagonist answers simply and directly that he did it all for money. He says his only plan was to steal some mana crystals the guild might drop, then calmly walks out the door. The door quickly closes with a click, leaving the association representative alone in the middle of the hospital room. Yuna crosses her arms in complete confusion and wonders aloud how that F-rank young man can be so incredibly strange. The young man walks calmly through the city streets, watching people go about their day beneath the bright sun. Ordinary people work and talk loudly on the sidewalks, maintaining a perfectly normal routine that will soon cease to exist. Two students walk past smiling and happily eating snacks, completely unaware of the terrible fate awaiting them. Tenma takes in the scenery and reflects, sadly, that this was the beautiful, lively world before its complete destruction. He finally arrives at the large apartment building, where he has lived modestly for quite some time. The young man calmly enters the access code into the digital lock, so he can return to his apartment after all the chaos. He sighs in relief at finally being home, comforted by the realization that nothing inside the residence has changed, exhausted by everything that happened. The young man throws himself onto the soft couch and lets out a long, weary sigh. He lies there in complete silence, staring at the ceiling as his mind begins processing his current situation. The protagonist reaches a hand upward and wonders what he must do to change humanity's fate of extinction. He remembers that in the normal flow of events, the association's heroes would be investigating the gate incident at that exact moment. But he soon realizes his mistake, since defeating the monster meant the incident was resolved before it could even occur. He activates the system window displaying his unique EX level trait, which exponentially multiplies all experience gained. The young man reflects with determination that receiving that unique ability made him the only person capable of changing the past. He clenches his fist and promises himself that he will become stronger than everyone else to prevent the tragedies that hasten the world's end. As an avid reader of a weekly magazine, he knows the major catastrophic events that will occur very well, but he closes his eyes in frustration upon realizing that, unfortunately, he cannot remember every detail precisely. He recalls how his sharpened perception completely changed his view of the world during his battle against the terrifying demons. The young man rises with determination, wondering whether he could acquire an ability capable of enhancing his own mind. He picks up an extremely complex book about advanced quantum mechanics to test the limits of his brain. Sitting in the library, he focuses all his attention on reading and desperately hopes to awaken a new technique. The young man carefully reads every paragraph in the difficult physics book, pushing his intellect to the limit as he stares at the pages. Discouraged, he collapses face, first onto the table and warily admits that he did not understand a single word. The young man closes the book in frustration, questions what on earth he is trying to do, and decides to abandon the crazy idea altogether. But suddenly, a notification appears before him and announces the detection of extremely high-level intellectual activity. Dozens of blue windows begin flashing in succession, showing that he has just acquired the intelligence skill. One final screen confirms that the ability instantly reached its maximum level, making the protagonist laugh in disbelief. Tenma focuses on the system window to analyze the actual benefits of the new mental power he awakened. He sees that his magical efficiency and total power rose slightly, but concludes that the change was not nearly as drastic as the other one. Tenma realizes that he can combine his new intelligence ability with perception to retrieve memories from his past. The protagonist concentrates deeply as a powerful light begins to shine around his body in the library. A system window appears, confirming the combined activation of his two primary techniques at maximum power. With his eyes closed, the young man begins diving deep into his mind in search of memories from his previous life. He remembers every battle he fought and every friendship he formed in that devastated world that ended in ruins. The system announces that he has awakened and instantly evolved the memory search skill to its maximum level. Tenma calmly opens his eyes while seated in the same spot, feeling that he now has total control over his own memories. The young man gives a confident smile when he realizes that his improvised plan to recover his memories worked perfectly. He remembers the exact event from the past that he needed to recall in order to take his next step. The young man picks up his phone to check the time and tries to unlock its screen using his usual password. He sighs in relief at finally remembering the password for his own bank account at the ATM. The protagonist laments his pitiful balance, realizing that poverty is the only thing that did not change after he regressed through time. The cafe attendant announces that his order is ready, abruptly interrupting the poor young man's lamentations. The young man picks up his iced coffee and starts sipping the cold drink through a straw while enjoying the peaceful moment. Sitting in the outdoor area, he sighs contentedly, feeling genuinely alive and renewed after so many hardships. Tenma reflects that his duty now is to find and eliminate every demon hidden in the city before they grow stronger. The young man decides that his first priority target must be the terrifying demon of growth, which will soon threaten humanity. Suddenly, his phone begins vibrating repeatedly, displaying an incoming call from someone named Hiroki Gondo. He looks at the screen in confusion, unable to immediately remember who the caller might be. When he answers, the man on the other end shouts that he is the substitute and says they are collecting mana stones. The man demands that he come to a dungeon immediately, prompting Tenma to activate memory search and figure out what is happening. He remembers that he used to work as a temporary hunter, filling vacancies on dungeon teams that needed support. The leader shouts at him to hurry, but the young man surprises him by calmly answering that he cannot make it. Tenma coldly explains that the real reason for refusing is simply that he does not have money for a taxi. He waits silently on the phone for the leader's reaction, leaving the man on the other end completely speechless. A short while later, a yellow taxi speeds through the city streets toward his destination. Already inside the car, he is amused at that the short-tempered leader hung up on him but sent transportation anyway. He uses the trip to review his list of max-level abilities, all fully ready for battle. The vehicle brakes sharply upon reaching a wooded park where the dungeon team waits anxiously. The young man calmly walks toward the gigantic, glowing blue gate surrounded by several other hunters. He gives a faint, confident smile, thinking that he will have excellent opportunities to test his entire new arsenal of powers. He approaches with a firm posture, ready to face any challenge that might emerge from the dangerous blue gate. Koki Kazama looks back in irritation and harshly complains that the protagonist is extremely late. The D-rank leader aggressively orders him to move quickly so they do not exceed the dungeon, clearing time limit. However, Tenma responds with such a dark, intimidating stare that the arrogant leader recoils in embarrassment and surprise. At that very moment, the system announces that merely staring at his rival awakened and rapidly leveled up his intimidation skill. He examines the new ability, which reduces the stats of weaker enemies, and concludes that it is an unexpected and highly useful bonus. The protagonist breaks the tension by politely asking whether the guild can lend him some basic equipment for the mission. Still frightened, the leader nervously orders Kyoya to hand the young man any spare equipment immediately. Koki leads them into the gate while the other members remark in surprise about how tense their boss seems today. The team cuts a dungeon goblin in half, splattering green blood across the stone floor. The hunters wipe away their sweat and celebrate the easy victory while Tenma watches closely from the rear beside Kyoya. Kaya shouts authoritatively, ordering the protagonist to hurry and finish cleaning up the fallen monster's remains. The young hunter Kaya rushes to help collect the loot while Tenma follows at a relaxed pace. A sharp dagger is driven forcefully into the slain goblin's body to extract the valuable mana stones hidden inside. Kyoya exerts himself and uses all his energy to cut through the monster's hide, but struggles greatly with the task. Tenma approaches the young man and asks whether he has a spare dagger, leaving the boy quite surprised by the request. Kyoya agrees and reaches out, placing one of his spare daggers directly into the experienced protagonist's hands. With a swift, surgical cut, Tenma drives the weapon into the creature, displaying flawless precision while extracting the material. The monster's blood sprays upward, leaving Koya completely shocked by the speed of the seemingly ordinary hunter. The system announces that he is recovering the monster's loot and quickly awakens the gathering skill at its initial levels. New windows appear in succession, showing that his monster skinning ability is evolving at a surprising rate. The technique reaches level 10 within moments as he holds up perfectly clean, gleaming mana crystals. Kalya's jaw drops at his speed, while Tenma calmly wipes the grime from his hands with a clean cloth. Wearing a calm expression, the protagonist calls the boy to continue through the dungeon and pays no mind to what happened. The pair continue along the dungeon's dark corridors, now filled with the bodies of defeated monsters. The hunters happily remark that the dungeon exploration is going far more smoothly than expected. Another hunter orders them to keep moving and rudely warns that the two rookies should focus solely on gathering, while Kalya does the hard work of skinning a defeated giant wolf. Tenma simply observes the situation calmly. A blue system notification reveals that the demon wolf's hide was extracted and preserved in perfect condition at rare quality. Immediately afterward, the panel also confirms the acquisition of high-quality wolf teeth thanks to their excellent work. The leader calls for the team to continue through the cave, and the other members follow without questioning his orders. Kyoya reflects privately and concludes that today's exploration is moving so quickly only because he used to take too long at the job. The boy smiles at Tenma and asks admiringly how he can become as fast and precise at extracting materials as him. The two continue walking back until they spot a lone goblin armed with a sword blocking the path ahead. The green creature growls menacingly and brandishes its weapon, revealing a strange tattoo on its left shoulder. The young hunter notices the tattoo and is startled to realize that this enemy is probably the squad leader who managed to escape. Showing no hesitation or fear, the protagonist draws his heavy sword and prepares to enter direct combat. Tenma calmly advances with sword in hand, thinking that this is exactly the kind of event he hoped to find. Koya panics and shouts a warning for his companion to be careful about advancing alone against the dangerous foe. He shouts that the young man is only a useless F-rank hunter and cannot defeat a goblin that large. The goblin leader gives a wicked, confident smile, believing it will win an extremely easy victory over the humans. With a taunting gesture, the monster beckons the protagonist into battle with its left hand, behaving quite arrogantly. The sound of heavy footsteps echoes through the cave, revealing that other, smaller monsters are running toward the battle site. 4 more armed green creatures appear behind the leader and take up an attack formation against the intruders. Kaya completely despairs when he realizes they must face 5 enemies at once, while Tenma only grumbles in boredom. The pack of hungry creatures charges at the protagonist at high speed, screaming hysterically as they run. With a sharp, gleaming gaze, Tenma instantly activates his newly acquired intimidation skill against the group. An immense dark, oppressive aura erupts from the young man's body and completely halts the frightened enemy's advance. One goblin drops its weapon in sheer terror as Tenma's intimidation technique continues to level up. Another monster completely collapses from fear as Tenma's ability evolves even further at that same instant. Every nearby goblin begins falling defeated by his presence alone, while the ability reaches absurd levels. 4 of the 5 monsters collapse unconscious on the stone floor, leaving only the squad leader standing and trembling in terror. The fearsome goblin leader breaks out in a cold sweat and retreats in fright, unable to understand what happened to all its companions. The young man smiles in satisfaction upon realizing how incredibly powerful and useful his new mental control ability is. But suddenly, a muffled sound behind him draws his attention, making the protagonist look back in curiosity. Kyoya has fainted from fear, his soul nearly leaving his body, leaving Tenma a little surprised by the boy's weakness. He turns back to the monster, pleased to realize that he no longer needs to hold back to conceal his true fighting abilities. In the blink of an eye, he charges at extreme speed, activating his max-level agility to deliver a fatal blow. An overwhelming sequence of swift, precise slashes illuminates the area, and tears through the goblin leader before it can defend itself. Tenma decides to seize the moment and conduct a small combat experiment against the desperate, wounded goblin leader. Sparks and blood fly through the air during the frantic sword fight, which echoes loudly through the cave's dark walls. The wounded, panting monster leans on its sword and struggles to breathe after taking the barrage of attacks. The young man examines his weapon and is disappointed to realize that more complex abilities require far more than basic dungeon battles. He sees his reflection in the blade and remembers that his experience bonus only makes learning easier. It does not give him talent. The young man clicks his tongue in irritation, but quickly focuses on the battle and resolves to end the terrible monster's life. With one brutal horizontal swing of his sword, he decapitates the monster and decisively ends the confrontation. The goblin leader's lifeless body collapses onto the dungeon floor as the battle finally comes to a complete end. At that moment, the system panel appears before him and confirms the sudden activation of his unique EX level trait. All the experience he receives is multiplied to an absurd degree, causing the protagonist to gain dozens of levels instantly. The startled young man sees a large red window indicating that he reached level 20 incredibly quickly. Tenma reflects that he should not have gained so much experience, since he just reached level 20 and has already had his level locked. The system displays a guide explaining that once a hunter's level is locked, they must complete a quest before they can advance again. The guide explains that these important awakening quests appear every 20 levels to test a warrior's true limits. He discovers that points accumulated while his level is locked can be freely spent in the system's item shop. Suddenly, the protagonist feels a sharp physical pain when he touches the red screen, which begins emitting small sparks of energy. He impatiently clicks his tongue, deciding to wait for the quest and calmly choose what to buy from the secret shop later. Tenma wakes the fallen boy and tells him to get up because they still need to finish collecting the monster's remains. Kaguya gets up, still extremely dizzy and sleepy, yawning as he tries to regain his senses after suddenly fainting. The young hunter looks down and is horrified to see the decapitated body of the goblin leader lying right in front of him. He shouts in disbelief that the powerful goblin captain and its entire band of subordinates were brutally slaughtered there. Kaguya asks what happened, and Tenma shamelessly lies that another group of hunters came through and defeated the monsters. The two return to working side by side, carefully cutting apart the dead goblins to collect all the valuable loot. While the boy works hard, the protagonist watches him in silence with a mysterious, thoughtful gaze. Tenma decides to open his status window, once again to examine all his current stats in detail. The panel reveals that he is 24 years old, locked at level 20, and has all his primary techniques maxed out. He stares thoughtfully at the message indicating his locked level, knowing that he needs to find a way to resolve it soon. The young man reflects that his awakening quest has not appeared yet, and he cannot afford to sit around waiting without training. Suddenly, a message flashes on the screen confirming that he has finally reached the maximum power permitted for F rank. A new notification ominously warns that the difficulty of his future awakening quest will be quite high. The young man stares at the glowing panel in confusion, wondering what the increase in difficulty truly means. Suddenly, his eyes widen in utter shock as he reads the new information that has just appeared on his screen. The hunter breaks out in a cold sweat and murmurs in concern as he realizes the situation has become extremely dangerous for him. He focuses on the system panel again, trying to process the absurd amount of information revealed all at once. Wearing a nervous smile, the young man concludes that this bizarre change in the system's difficulty is complete madness. Kaguya turns around with his hands full of mana crystals and looks at the protagonist, unable to understand why he is so tense. Tenma lets out a strange laugh while looking at the bodies, making Kaguya wonder in confusion whether the young man has some bizarre fetish. The system explains that evolving his unique trait will provide colossal benefits, such as breaking his technique's level limits. The young man is surprised to realize that this trait evolution is entirely different from any ordinary awakening quest. He sees that the rewards include raising his technique's maximum level and unlocking a mysterious causal reversal shop. Tenma smiles excitedly upon realizing that reaching D rank will grant him an absolutely overwhelming increase in power. He examines the objective, which requires defeating a demon that, according to his memories, will appear in a gate 3 days from now. This fearsome enemy is the Demon of Growth, a monster that would become a commander in the future and massacre humanity. He notices a small blue window glowing discreetly beside the main one and wonders what this new screen might be. Kyoya calls for him to leave, and Tenma quickly closes the windows, calmly replying that he is coming with the boy. The system reveals that his unique trait has granted him a special box containing a rare category weapon. He views the acquired item in his inventory and immediately decides to open the mysterious box to discover which weapon he received. Powerful white light suddenly appears before the young man, illuminating the dark interior of the damp stone cave. A beautiful sword with a bluish blade and decorated hilt emerges from the glowing ashes, radiating a very powerful magical aura. The blue screen confirms that he has acquired the special rare level Soul Devourer sword to use in battle. Sometime later, the entire group of hunters finally begins exiting the blue gate and returning to the beautiful forest outside. Kyoya cheerfully says goodbye to Master Koki Kazama and announces that he and Tenma are heading home first. The young hunters walk side by side, chatting and laughing happily as they move away from the gate area. Tenma looks at the boy nostalgically and mentally calculates that Kyoya must be only around 6 years old in the future. Their leader Koki Kazama sends a message telling him to check his account, which has just received a deposit of 50,000 yen. The protagonist is confused because his payment was supposed to come from the agency, and the correct amount should have been only 35,000 yen. The leader kindly explains that he sent an additional bonus as thanks because everything went perfectly thanks to the young man. Koki waves goodbye as he walks away across the bridge, leaving Tenma standing thoughtfully in the middle of the road and staring at his phone. The young man smirks and reflects that his power only needs to rise a little before people start showing him more respect, but his deep thoughts are interrupted by the growling of his stomach, reminding him how hungry he is now. Tenma celebrates finally having money to buy food, but his phone begins vibrating with a new notification. The young man sees that Gondo deposited only 4,500 yen because he deducted the taxi fare. The protagonist is furious with the man's stinginess and curses him for sending such a pitiful amount. Despite having little money, he decides to visit a large local supermarket that night and buy a few essentials. Inside the store, the young man holds a bunch of fresh broccoli and takes a deep breath, savoring the vegetable's pleasant aroma. The scent of fresh food delights him, reminding him that seeing fresh vegetables in the ruined future was an impossible dream. As he admires the vegetables, the young man suddenly senses a familiar presence beside him and turns to see who it is. He is surprised to come face to face with the association's Eunice Sherigain, casually dressed and wearing glasses at the market. He asks whether she is spying on him, but the irritated young woman blushes and replies that she is simply doing her regular shopping. Tenma calmly explains that he only wanted to smell the broccoli, convincing Yuna that she needs to keep an eye on him. The protagonist studies her face and suddenly begins to find the young huntress's features quite familiar. He decides to activate his level 10 memory search to retrieve any hidden information about her family. His memories reveal an image of Yuna beside an incredibly similar-looking woman who carries herself like a warrior. Tenma breaks the silence and directly asks whether she happens to have an older sister named Yuki Sherigain. The huntress's eyes widen as she asks how he knows, while the young man thinks it would be impossible not to know her. Yuki Shuriken was the legendary infinite archer, and one of the 11 most powerful warriors in humanity's devastated future. Known as the Goblin Slayer, she fought with fury after losing her younger sister in a dungeon in the past. He realizes that saving Yuna changed fate and prevented her older sister from becoming that hatred-filled warrior. Trying to cover himself, he jokingly replies that he only knows her because she is so beautiful, leaving Yuna thoroughly confused. The young man adds that Yuna greatly resembles her sister, making the huntress blush intensely with embarrassment. He plans to recruit Yuna for the battle against the Demon of Growth, because he knows she possesses a teleportation technique. Tenma holds out the device and bluntly asks for her phone number, sending the huntress into a complete panic. Stammering and gesturing, she says that she does not mind giving him her contact information, but stresses that there should be an order to these things. Realizing what she is thinking, Tenma gravely says that he only needs the number to repay the debt for her saving his life earlier. Extremely irritated and embarrassed by her own misunderstanding, she abruptly snatches the phone from his hand. Yuna furiously enters the numbers while radiating a fiery aura of rage, making the protagonist watch her with some alarm. She returns the phone with a sharp gesture, forcing the young man to quickly catch it in the air before it falls. The huntress walks away grumbling loudly and complaining about his nerve after he made her embarrass herself at the supermarket. The next day, Tenma steps off a bus with his new sword at his waist, thinking that his destination must be nearby. He examines the powerful bluish blade, remembering that its attack power is 3 times greater than that of his old sword. The panel reveals that the weapon is actually super rare rank and possesses the special passive effect of absorbing opponents' souls. He recognizes that a good weapon alone is not enough, and that he must master a legendary sword technique before the confrontation. Thinking logically, the young man reflects that learning true swordsmanship requires seeking out a true swordsman. The young man arrives before the facade of a traditional Japanese kendo dojo belonging to a renowned swordmaster. The protagonist politely knocks on the large wooden sliding door and loudly announces his arrival at the entrance. Realizing that the entrance is unlocked, he slowly slides the wooden door aside and peers into the silent hall. He knows that defeating the demons will require a devastating technique capable of inflicting immense damage all at once. The legendary swordsman who lives and trains in that dojo is famous for being able to cut mountains in half with a single movement. This elite hunter was considered a true beacon of hope for all humanity, performing miracles in battle. He is the legendary sword saint known by every future survivor simply as Taiyo Kirishima. Blue-haired Kirishima grumbles with his head lowered, complaining about having to work so early on that cold morning. Oblivious to the grumbling, the protagonist walks firmly across the wooden floor toward the area where the master is sitting. Tenma feels his heart beat faster and mentally prepares for his first encounter with the formidable warrior. Drawing near, the young man finds hundreds of papers spread across the table, all bearing the master's signatures and autographs. The sword saint lets out a long, sleepy yawn with a hand over his mouth, looking completely bored with the routine. Without properly looking at his visitor, Kirishima disdainfully asks whether he is just another fan seeking an autograph. He smiles warmly while holding his pen and directly asks where the young man would like him to sign. The protagonist looks at the master and remembers how his swordsmanship was considered a true living legend in the devastated future. His attacks possessed devastating force, capable of splitting the heavens and cutting through great mountain ranges. Although his future strength was unquestionable, the master's past personality seems very different from Tenma's memories. The sword saint bursts out laughing, finding it incredibly amusing that the young man supposedly wants only his autograph. He loudly boasts to everyone that the young man obviously wants his signature, because he is the world's great savior. Tenma silently drinks his soda, thinking that the legendary master is somehow even worse than the rumors claimed. The young man remembers that in the previous timeline, the master mysteriously died at the hands of demons, seeking to extinguish hope. Kirishima removes the cap from his pen and cheerfully asks whether the visitor would like him to sign directly on his back. But Tenma surprises him by respectfully asking the master to grant him his valuable teachings in the art of swordsmanship. The sword saint becomes incredibly excited and hugs him tightly, saying he should have asked to become his disciple from the beginning. The protagonist settles onto the dojo's couch and calmly waits for instructions while looking at the signatures on the table. Kirishima serves hot tea and laughingly admits that he has spent the past month focused solely on signing autographs for his fans. He then suspiciously asks how the boy found him there. Since he has not yet completed a single mission as a hunter, the master leans forward and fixes a piercing gaze on the young man, trying to uncover his intentions. But he quickly returns to his conceited manner, assuming that the young man must have fallen in love with his technique during the assessment test. Kirishima laughs loudly at his own joke, while Tenma merely forces an awkward smile at the master's childish behavior. The protagonist affirms his false admiration and politely asks to learn one of the master's swordsmanship abilities. He remembers meeting the drunken sword saint at a bar in the future, where the man ended up revealing a crucial secret. The drunken master said that there is a basic and easy-to-learn technique that serves as the foundation for absolutely everything. In the memory, the sword saint was outraged that Tenma did not know the world's most famous and fundamental technique. He recalls the fundamental technique's name in his mind, remembering that the move consists of a perfect, straight line slash. Back in the present, Tenma formally asks to learn that exact slash, slightly surprising the swordsman with his request. Kirishima rises and skillfully removes a bamboo sword from the weapon rack, preparing to begin the lesson. The master holds the bamboo practice sword toward the protagonist and sternly orders him to try gripping it. With perfect calm, the young man reaches his right hand toward the wooden weapon's handle, ready to accept the challenge. Before he even touches the sword, the master categorically declares that the young man has absolutely no talent. Tenma complains that he has not even touched the handle, but the master insists that at his level, he can assess talent by sight alone. The young hunter refuses the rejection and determinedly exclaims that the master cannot be certain till he tries. Letting out a long, discouraged sigh, the master appears to yield to the young man's persistence and decides to give him a chance. The master finally places the practice weapon in the protagonist's hands, so he can make his first attempt. The moment he grips the handle, Tenma's level 10 swordsmanship activates and releases immense pressure around him. The sword saint's eyes widen in disbelief at that perfect stance, while the young man confidently questions him. He notices that although the young man seems untalented, his stance and grip changed completely when he held the wooden weapon. His attitude changing entirely, the swordsman adopts a serious tone and curtly orders the young man to follow him. He leads him to the dojo's outdoor area, where 3 large, thick tree trunks are firmly planted in the dirt. The master wields his own practice sword and says he will first give a practical demonstration to show him how it is done. He smiles proudly and says that although the technique remains incomplete, it will serve as a gift to his fan. Kirishima swiftly raises his arms, gripping the handle firmly and positioning the sword above his head for the strike. With a quick and incredibly powerful movement, he brings the practice weapon straight down, slicing through the air with extreme precision. Thick tree trunk before him is cleanly sliced in half and falls to the ground in 2 identical pieces. The sword saint turns confidently and simply orders the young man to make his attempt against the second wooden trunk. Tenma takes a deep breath and assumes the same combat stance, raising the wooden sword above his head in complete focus. but when he swings, the practice weapon merely grazes the wood and rebounds forcefully, causing the startled young man to stagger. Kirishima sighs in disappointment, confirming that the young man truly has no talent for performing that simple slash. Stubbornly, the protagonist continues striking the tree trunk repeatedly, but the sword keeps bouncing off without stopping. The master rubs his forehead and gloomily predicts that at this rate, the boy will need at least 10 years to learn the basics. Tenma grows tired of failing and asks whether there is not a better explanation, while the master already considers sending him away. Kirishima decides to offer one final tip, pointing upward and saying that when the sword is raised, it must connect with the heavens. He adds that as the young man brings the strike down, he must envision heaven and earth joining in one perfect straight line. The young man listens to the advice with complete attention and nods slightly, confirming that he understands the technique's concept. Concentrating, he raises the weapon again and delivers an overwhelmingly powerful vertical strike against the wooden trunk. The master turns his back and warily announces that today's training is over, because he considers the boy's persistence pointless. But suddenly, he stops and looks back in astonishment when he hears a very strange sound coming from the second trunk. A beam of brilliant energy descends in a straight line and slices through the air as the blade strikes the wood head on. Kirishima is completely frozen, trying to understand what he just witnessed before his eyes. He is astonished to notice that Tenma's sword trajectory grows more precise and sharper with each movement. The master's eyes widen in disbelief, judging such a sudden improvement to be impossible. Wooden sword passes the trunk with such a perfect cut that the wood smoothly splits in half. Both halves of the wood fall to either side, revealing the brutal impact delivered by the young man. Tenma calmly lowers the weapon while observing the wooden trunk, now completely split in two. Tenma asks whether that was the right feeling, and a flustered Kirishima applauds while retracting his claim that the boy had no talent. But the master quickly points ahead in excitement and says that a true straight line slash demands much more. He claims that the real technique must slice through 4 trunks lined up in a row with a single strike instead of only one. Kirishima thinks this would be impossible for any novice, but Tenma simply decides to try on his first attempt. The swordsman is confused by the boy's calmness, unable to imagine what is about to happen. The young man then positions himself before the row of trunks and prepares his mind to execute the ultimate strike. He raises the sword vertically toward the heavens, while concentrating all his energy into the movement. Kirishima's eyes widen when he senses the immense pressure beginning to radiate from that stance. Tenma brings the blade down at absurd speed, releasing a straight line blast of cutting wind. Every trunk splits instantly as the system multiplies his experience and raises the ability to maximum level. The slash passes through not only the 4 targets, but also opens a gigantic crater that tears across the ground to the horizon. The sword saint falls backward onto the ground, utterly stunned by the devastating power of the attack. He stares at the boy in complete shock, unable to understand how on earth anyone managed to do something so insane. As the sunset colors the city orange, the scene shifts to a residential apartment complex. Yuna appears at her home's entrance using teleportation, carrying shopping bags in both hands. When she announces that she is home, her older sister immediately scolds her for using spatial teleportation so carelessly. Yuki Sharagain, an SS-rank huntress, warns that wasting mana could leave her without resources during an emergency. The young woman shrugs, but Yuki is surprised to notice that her younger sister's face is completely red. Yuna tries to hide her embarrassment, while the older sister insists that her strange behavior gives everything away. Removing her glasses and trying to change the subject, the girl says that nothing happened and takes a deep breath. Shy and blushing, she asks her sister whether she knows someone named Tenma Tsukishiro. With her heart racing, the young woman repeats the question, wanting to know any detail about the mysterious young man. Yuki thoughtfully places a hand on her chin and honestly replies that she has never heard that name before. Yuna smiles with silly relief, while the older sister finds her reaction strange and asks whether she ate something spoiled. Later, in her bedroom, the girl sits on her bed and stares at her phone with a discreet smile. She remembers when Tenma mentioned her sister and dreamily concludes that he only did it to get her number. Looking at the saved contact on the screen, she thinks that although he is rather strange, he is also quite attractive. Suddenly, Yuki appears in the room to tease her sister, making the girl jump out of her skin. Yuna hides beneath the blankets in embarrassment, while Yuki laughs and says that she is far too easy to read. Curious and excited about the romance, the older sister approaches and demands every detail about the potential boyfriend. Hugging her pillow, Yuna shyly reveals that he is the same boy who helped her a few days earlier. She swears that it is nothing serious and explains that the young man merely asked for her phone number politely. Yuki gently pats her sister's head and asks to meet him if the relationship ends up working out. Yuki then announces that she will be away for a few days to participate in a major gate raid with her guild. The older sister asks the rookie not to get involved in any dangerous missions, and receives a humorous reply from her. Yuki then says goodbye and leaves the room, calmly closing the door so the girl can rest. Alone again, Yuna picks up her phone and settles in with a gentle smile on her face. She stares at Tenma's name on the screen with her heart pounding, unable to hide how deeply he affected her. Back at the training field, Tenma's slash has left a clean trail of devastation through the vegetation. The young man pants heavily as the system confirms that the ability instantly reached its maximum level. He celebrates the success, realizing that the massive experience multiplier allowed him to master everything within seconds. Tenma turns to thank him for the training, but is surprised to see Kirishima kneeling with his head lowered. The protagonist cannot understand what is happening as the legendary sword Sate bows humbly and pleads with him. Kirishima grabs the young man's legs in desperation and begs him to demonstrate the strike one more time. The master cries in frustration, unable to understand how someone reached level 10 in only a few attempts. Tenma is shocked to realize that he has surpassed the original technique of its own creator. The status window reveals that at maximum level, the slash gained the effect of cutting even intangible things. The young man remembers that one day remains before the demon appears and decides to use it to learn more sword techniques. While the swordsman continues pleading on the ground, Tenma agrees to demonstrate the slash again on one condition. In exchange for the demonstration, the protagonist asks him to teach the other abilities he created. Tenma extends his hand with a friendly smile and finally introduces himself properly. Kirishima looks at him with tear-filled eyes, deeply moved by the young man's gesture. Without hesitation, the man leaps up and tightly embraces Tenma while loudly calling the boy his master. He excitedly declares that from that moment onward, Tenma will become his great teacher. The Sword Saint promises to teach him his entire repertoire, while Tenma tries to make him release his neck. Immediately afterward, they begin intense training, with thunderous leaps and aerial slashes tearing through the sky. Kirishima demonstrates one of his secret techniques, unleashing flaming blasts with extreme ferocity. The attack's impact creates a gigantic fiery explosion that shakes the entire surrounding area. The master finishes the stance flawlessly as the smoke from the strike dissipates across the field. He elegantly sheathes his sword and eagerly asks whether the young man managed to understand the technique. Tenma breaks out in a cold sweat, frustrated that he cannot even follow the speed of the movement. Exhausted on the ground, the young man realizes that he cannot even comprehend the theory behind the complex strike. He reflects that despite his special trait, the fact remains that he possesses no natural talent for swordsmanship. Feeling fatigue weigh heavily on his body, He realizes that forcing himself beyond his limit this way will only exhaust him. Tenma decides to end the day's training and announces that he has another important matter to handle. He smiles and says that he looks forward to seeing the swordsman's perfected version of the straight line slash. Kirishima agrees and reveals that although he has a license, he never wanted to hunt, but meeting Tenma changed his mind. Filled with determination, the master shouts that he will become a great hunter, while Tenma merely wishes him good luck. Later, the protagonist walks to a trade building to negotiate the sale of materials obtained during his hunts. The blacksmith appraises the wolf items and is impressed by the hide and fangs' flawless preservation. The man asks whether he possesses a skinning skill, and the boy replies that his survival depends on it. The craftsman explains that high-quality raw materials grant additional effects when equipment is created. The man asks Tenma to bring him more resources in the future and promises to pay a fair price for the rare pieces. Checking the basic leather armor he received, Tenma grumbles that the payment seems rather poor compared with the material's value. Even so, he recognizes that any beginner equipment makes an enormous difference in battle. Picking up his phone as he leaves, the young man decides that it is time to resolve his final pending matter. The phone repeatedly rings on the small table, displaying Tenma's call on its illuminated screen. A woman's hand quickly reaches forward to answer before the call goes to voicemail. Wearing a facial mask, Yuna answers breathlessly and hears the young man confirm her last name on the other end. Tenma asks whether she has a moment to talk, immediately setting the girl's heart racing. She tries to pretend she is uninterested by saying that she is busy and considers making him wait on purpose. But Tenma ruins the mood by immediately revealing that the matter concerns the emergence of an irregular gate. The young woman's romantic expectations instantly collapse, leaving her completely speechless on the floor. Furious and shocked, she rips the facial mask from her face and shouts into the phone in disbelief. Tenma's limit. Brick Quest requires him to defeat a demon to unlock new powers and a special shop. Looking through the dark window at night, the young man grips his blade and prepares for the decisive confrontation. He focuses coldly on his objective, determined to complete the dangerous demon extermination quest. The next day, Tenma and Yuna arrive at the meeting point near the gate and apologize for being slightly late. Wearing a suit, Yuna asks whether the information about the anomaly is reliable, and he assures her that she will see soon. The huntress sighs and explains they will accompany guild members into a D-ranked dungeon. She hesitates for a moment and begins speaking with a flushed face, drawing the young man's attention. Too embarrassed to say what she was thinking, she loses patience with herself and quickens her pace ahead of him. Tenma runs after her in surprise, as they both approach the group of hunters waiting beside the gate. Two Roman guild hunters welcome the newcomers and remark that they arrived just in time for the gate to open. Yuna formally introduces herself as an association member, and the group's mage responds warmly. When asked about Tenma, the young woman explains that he is there to provide support if any anomaly occurs. The guild leader arrogantly introduces himself and warns that they must move quickly and leave as soon as they finish. He coldly stares at the pair and orders them not to interfere in combat, because every monster is the guild's exclusive prey. Tenma simply agrees while noticing that the leader did not even bother to acknowledge his presence. Looking at the assembled group, the protagonist remembers that in the original timeline, all of them died at the demon's hands. Feeling someone staring at his back, the guild leader turns irritably and asks whether the boy wants to say something. Remaining calm and neutral, the young man simply replies that he has nothing to say. The man tells him to stay quiet and simply follow the group toward the dungeon entrance. Yuna whispers irritably beside Tenma that she hates guilds because they always treat the association as a rival. The squad begins crossing the dimensional gate while the two observers follow close behind. Before taking the final step, The huntress asks for a brief pause to measure the magical energy radiating from the rift. She extends her hand and concentrates her powers to analyze the magical density around the vortex. Carefully completing her reading, she opens her eyes and prepares to give her verdict. The girl says the gate shows no sign of an anomaly and asks whether he is certain about his claim, confident in his memories of the past. Tenma crosses his arms and replies that she will discover the truth very soon. Finding the young man intriguing, she decides to trust her intuition and accompany him despite the risk that he might be deceiving her. Entering the dungeon, they find a forest illuminated by a beautiful full moon above gleaming waters. Yuno is captivated by the mystical beauty of the landscape and admires the view as she walks. Tenma places a hand on his blade's hilt, focused on finding where the dungeon boss is hiding. He knows very well that somewhere within the dense woods lies a dangerous demon, still in the process of developing. The group follows the trail beside the moonlit river, while frightening howls echo through the darkness. The guild leader turns around to call the pair's attention and orders them not to fall behind. He grumbles disdainfully that it would be an enormous headache if something bad happened to either of them there. Yuna replies with a forced smile, angrily thinking that a mere D-rank hunter should not be ordering her around. The guild members laugh casually, arrogantly believing that this incursion will be an easy walk in the park. Tenma observes the scene and reflects that rookie hunters often have the foolish illusion that they will someday become the strongest. From personal experience, he knows how difficult and painful it is to climb each step in the power rankings. Few understand that only true freaks of nature can reach the top and attain the legendary S rank. A warning shout from the vanguard breaks his train of thought, announcing the imminent approach of magical beasts. Ferocious silver wolves appear at high speed, roaring and ready to tear the intruders apart. Taiga quickly draws both swords and identifies 3 dangerous specimens charging toward them. The frontline warriors steady their weapons and assume battle formation to receive the impact. The rear mage raises her staff and chants a spell to erect a powerful protective barrier. A golden dome of energy expands around the combatants, protecting the entire group's position. Another caster activates her magic circles and prepares a rain of brilliant arcane arrows. The beasts slam violently into glowing shield but fail to break through the hunter's solid defense. At the command to fire, the mage releases dozens of mana projectiles toward the furious monsters. The energy arrows explode directly against the beasts, dealing severe damage and disorienting the pack. One wolf crashes to the ground and lets out a sharp yelp after taking the accurate magical barrage. Exploiting the opening, the leader and his warriors charge forward, while fiercely brandishing their swords. They attack the fallen monster together, delivering precise blows in an attempt to finish the creature without delay. Watching from afar, Tenma acknowledges that the squad could have cleared an ordinary dungeon without much difficulty. The only problem is that this dungeon is not ordinary, and a sinister glow echoes out, making the leader freeze in terror. The wolves begin radiating a terrifying demonic mist, revealing that the demon has corrupted them. A gigantic beast opens its terrifying jaws to devour the hunter, who is paralyzed with fear. Taiga grits his teeth in pure despair upon realizing that the creature's strength is far beyond the expected level. The leader shouts in panic for everyone to immediately retreat inside the protective magical barrier. He is terrified to see the monsters continue advancing, even after taking direct attacks to vital points. Taiga desperately runs back toward the barrier, while the enraged creature leaps after him. The mage tries to stop the monster's advance by firing another high-speed barrage of arcane projectiles. But the magical attacks barely scratch the giant wolf, which continues charging with its sharp teeth. The girl is shocked to realize that her spells have no effect on the beast. The wolf charges the golden shield, causing the protective barrier to crack beneath the force of its bite. With a deafening crash, the shield completely shatters, and leaves the hunters unprotected. The leader leaps into the air and delivers a desperate slash in an attempt to stop the monster's deadly advance. His companions join the assault, delivering multiple coordinated strikes to bring down the beast. The mage is violently thrown backward and screams in terror as the monster's claws nearly reach her. Taiga roars for everyone to remain focused and keep fighting without yielding another inch. Tenma watches and mentally explains that the demonic aura strengthens monsters beyond their normal limits. This devastating corruption is the main reason a demon's presence is so terrifying. The guild's warriors continue fighting a bloody, chaotic battle against the corrupted wolves. Yuna notices the creature's abnormal strength and anxiously asks whether they should intervene to help the group. Activating his sensory perception, Tenma warns that they may not have time to worry about the others. A wave of magical detection expands around them and reveals a new threat approaching through the woods. A monstrous wolf appears on the horizon and walks toward the two with an unmistakable thirst for blood. The predator releases a terrifying howl and leads a fierce, straight-line charge against Tenma and the huntress. The beast leaps with its claws ready to kill, while the young man remains calm and prepares his weapon. His sword's magical blade shines intensely as it accumulates a dense layer of cutting energy. With a lightning-fast slash, he slices the monster in half and receives attribute points instead of ordinary levels. The young man smiles, impressed by his rare sword's sharp power after eliminating the first enemy. Two more furious wolves seize the moment and leap together, ready to tear the protagonist apart. Tenma takes a deep breath and prepares to unleash an overwhelming counterattack against both beasts. But suddenly, several golden chains of magical energy fly through the air directly behind him. The glowing chains wrap around the airborne wolves and swiftly, mercilessly bind their movements. The monsters fall immobilized to the ground, unable to break free from the powerful restraining magic. Releasing all her mana, Yuna shouts for him to exploit the opening and finish the enemies. Tenma acknowledges the girl's talent, realizing that the legendary huntress's sister is extremely capable. Wasting no time, he executes a fluid sequence of luminous slashes against the paralyzed targets. The cross-shaped strike hits the beast's head, on and releases an explosive wave of cutting mana. The monster's remains fall in pieces to the ground, confirming the threat's instant elimination. The huntress's eyes widen, amazed by the ease and lethal precision displayed by the young man. A silvery mist of spiritual essence begins drifting from the fallen beast's bodies. The Soul Eater sword begins absorbing the soul's energy, transforming the enemy's power into its own strength. The system notification updates the weapon's soul concentration to 13% capacity. Looking toward the clearing, Yuna remarks with concern that the guild squad is still in trouble. The Roman guild members continue suffering severe injury as they try to contain the rest of the pack. Cornered and desperate, the guild leader swallows his pride and shouts for the two observers to help them. Tenma disdainfully crosses his arms and ironically reminds him of his words about not touching someone else's prey. The hunter despairs and furiously asks how he dares say such a thing at a time like this. Distracted by the argument, the man takes a brutal blow to the chest and is sent flying, unable to breathe. Hearing the adventurer's agonized screams, Yuna again asks whether they should save them. After defeating the monsters with great difficulty, the group collapses to the ground in exhaustion and plans a brief rest. One guild member confronts the leader and asks whether he truly intends to continue the incursion. The group's mage adds that moving forward, in their physical condition, would be a death sentence for everyone. Stubborn and irritated, the leader insists that they cannot flee from a simple D-rank dungeon. He shouts that if they fail this mission, they will have no money to buy new equipment or pay their debts. Blinded by ambition, the hunter forgets the fundamental truth that dungeons are deadly traps. Yuna steps forward with authority and firmly declares that the gate is far too dangerous for them to continue. Taiga confronts Yuna demanding proof that the gate is irregular and angrily saying that she has no authority there. He arrogantly claims that the guild is in command of the mission and tells the young woman not to overstep her bounds. As the leader continues arguing, the group's mage trembles in fear after sensing a terrifying presence. The girl calls to the leader in a trembling voice, utterly horrified by what she sees emerging from the darkness. She points toward the woods, making Taiga turn curiously to see what caused the sudden panic. Two gigantic red eyes glow atop the hill, radiating an unbelievable thirst for blood. A colossal paw wrapped in scarlet mist strikes the ground and crushes the earth with brutal impact. The dungeon's supreme boss reveals itself before everyone as a titanic wolf filled with sinister energy. The creature unleashes an overwhelming roar that makes the air itself vibrate and echoes throughout the dimension. The roar's shock wave sends the hunters flying through the air and leaves everyone disoriented on the ground. Lying on the ground, Taiga is paralyzed with terror as he realizes the chasm of power between them. Tenma immediately assumes his combat stance and maintains absolute focus on the gigantic monster. He recognizes the beast as the dungeon's true leader, strengthened by demonic corruption. The young man positions himself between the fallen group and the ferocious beast, ready to face it head-on. The silver wolf unleashes another thunderous roar, activating an area of effect terror ability. The fear status afflicts the group with severe headaches and drastically reduces their movement. Feeling the mental pressure, Tenma shouts for Yuna to use her escape magic and get everyone out of there. Yuna desperately asks them to gather the wounded, because she cannot maintain her concentration for long. Resisting the headache, Tenma awakens and rapidly evolves the mental fortitude skill through the system. His mental resistance increases considerably, allowing him to immediately regain his clarity. With his mind shielded against terror, the protagonist prepares to act and contain the monster. Staggering and terrified, Taiga tries to crawl away in desperate search of an escape route. The fallen mage grabs the leader's leg and begs for help amid the chaos of battle. But in sheer panic, he kicks away his own companion's hand so he can flee alone. The man runs away like a coward while Tenma watches his despicable behavior. Tenma realizes that if the idiot flees alone, he will move beyond the rescue teleportation's range. The young man immediately activates intimidation, releasing a terrifying red gaze. A crushing presence fills the area and paralyzes the surrounding targets with pure dread. Suffocated by Tenma's aura, the guild leader collapses face first onto the ground, completely incapacitated. Yuna activates the large magic circle on the ground and warns everyone that spatial teleportation is ready. At that same instant, the titanic wolf drops from the sky with its claws, spread to crush the fleeing group. Tenma appears at high speed, carrying the two fallen hunters into the magical area. The beast's enormous mouth snaps shut furiously on the exact spot where the adventurers were gathered. Its fangs collide with the rocky ground, creating an explosion of dust and debris across the clearing. The group reappears safely atop a distant cliff, while the beast howls in frustration. Exhausted and trembling, the guild members breathe in relief after escaping imminent death. One warrior tells everyone to get up, but Yuna worriedly announces that the magic failed to take them to the exit. The young woman looks at Tenma in alarm and reveals that the gate's exit has been completely blocked. Tenma firmly explains that in an irregular gate, the passage will open only when the boss is defeated. Taiga panics completely and asks how ordinary people could possibly kill an aberration like that. Without hesitation, Tenma draws his gleaming sword and assumes an imposing stance before the terrified man. The hunter screams and covers his head, thinking that the protagonist is about to decapitate him. But with a masterful spin, the young man slices through a wolf that was sneaking up behind them, clearing the air with his blade. He tells everyone to remain calm and promises that he will eliminate the monster himself. The young man turns his back on the group and walks with determination toward the place where the main beast resides. Suddenly, The mage points toward the forest in shock, after noticing a bizarre transformation taking place. Several black shadows and sinister tentacles begin sprouting from the carcass of the fallen wolf. A grotesque demonic mask consumes the giant wolf body as it roars in profound agony. The darkness devours the creature completely, assuming a bizarre new form filled with evil power. Tenma observes the colossal silhouette in the woods and realizes that the demon has taken possession of the boss's body. Tenma focuses ahead, knowing that this colossal monster is the primary target he must defeat to escape. It is the dreaded demon of growth, which has assumed a bestial form wrapped in pure dark energy. Yuna stands beside him in shock and asks whether he truly intends to face the evil aberration. Tenma announces that he and Yuna will defeat the monster, leaving the other hunters in disbelief. The terrified guild members tremble and insist that trying to face the thing as a pair is pure suicide. Tenma then turns to Sejima and calls out to the cowardly leader, who shudders upon hearing his name. The young man asks to borrow Sejima's metal armor to increase his chances of defending himself. As they walk toward the danger, Yuna asks what the creature is and whether he has a plan. Tenma calmly replies that he intends to subdue the monster using nothing but brute force. Yuna gives an awkward smile and sarcastically says that this is the perfect way for both of them to die together. Wielding his sword, he explains that the boss's increase in power is directly connected to the gate's closure. Suddenly, several wolves charge furiously, roaring straight toward the protagonist. With a devastating strike, Tenma slices the beasts in midair and releases a powerful blast of cutting mana. Another pack of wolves charges at high speed and tries to ambush Yuna. Without hesitation, she casts a devastating lightning spell that descends from the heavens upon the monsters. The explosion of lightning strikes the earth with force and destroys the beasts in an impressive flash. Tenma praises the attack, and the girl confidently reminds him that she will soon be promoted to B, rank hunter. The young man regrets not receiving the experience, but acknowledges that her help speeds up clearing the area. The slain monster's souls are absorbed by the sword, raising its concentration to its maximum capacity of 100%. The system unlocks a special ability in the blade, which begins shining intensely blue. A message reveals that soul release now drastically increases the attack's damage for 5 seconds. Tenma smiles in amazement at the absurd power he will have at his disposal, even if only briefly. Yuna points upward and warns in alarm that the boss has begun radiating an extremely dangerous aura. Atop a moonlit cliff, the beast roars ferociously and spreads its darkness across the sky. The monster's howl echoes through the forest as evil energy completely envelops its body. The huntress notices that the other wolves have grown restless because of the bizarre sound coming from the aberration. Tenma concludes that he must act quickly before the demon finishes absorbing all of the boss's power. Yuna asks him to explain what he knows, saying that the thing looks more like a living natural disaster. The young man tells her that a demon of growth possessed the beast, using a sinister evil power. Red screens appear before the two, warning that they have entered the domain of a demonic servant. The restriction categorically prevents any living being within a radius of 50 yards from growing or becoming stronger. Yuna asks about the restriction in confusion, and Tenma prepares to briefly explain its meaning. Protagonist confirms from his memories of the past that the domain's effect works exactly that way. Every demon that manipulates evil energy carries a dangerous and distinctive trait. Each demonic entity possesses its own domain, affecting any intruder who sets foot within its territory. This creature's rule nullifies every magical buff and prevents new abilities from awakening during battle. He considers that its current range is short, but the problem will become extremely severe if the area continues expanding. Yuna tenses as she senses the imminent danger, while both watch a sudden change atop the cliff. The monster finally locates them and stares down at the pair with its glowing eyes. The creature furiously leaps from the hill and streaks toward the hunters like a dark trail. The monster's impact against the ground cracks the earth and generates a colossal wave of smoke and debris. The powerful gust pushes both hunters backward, forcing them to plant their feet to avoid falling. When the dust settles, a demonic figure with elven features appears floating above the crater. Yuna finds the new appearance strange, and Tenma explains that the monster absorbed that form in the past. The entity floats in the air, concentrating a threatening sphere of purple magical energy in its hands. Several dark, flaming spheres multiply around the magical aberration's body. Both hunters' eyes widen in surprise as they witness the creature's absurd magical power. Tenma is confused because his memories did not indicate that the demon could use this kind of magic. He deduces that the creature stole the devoured Alpha's spells and decides that they need to dodge. The young man tells Yuna to evade at the exact moment. He gives the warning signal. Tenma activates max-level perception to calculate the magical projectile's trajectories. The demonic elf raises her arms, concentrating dark projectiles of pure destruction. She points her hands toward the pair, ready to fire the devastating attack. The creature spreads its fingers and releases a violent magical barrage against the ground. Tenma shouts to Yuna that this is the exact moment to dodge. A rain of purple spheres fires at high speed and tears through the air. The projectiles fall like meteors upon the battlefield, destroying everything in their path. Tenma slides across the ground and miraculously evades the consecutive explosions. The young man activates his level 10 agility to gain momentum and extreme speed. He triggers his rapid steps technique to maneuver between the smoking craters. Using his mastery of physical combat, he leaps into the air and narrowly escapes the magic. The young man lands on the ground after combining multiple abilities to avoid being pulverized. Tenma pants heavily, amazed that he needed 4 powers just to survive. He admits that he would have died at that moment if he had not been wearing the metal armor. Aware of the danger, Tenma decides that he must counterattack before the next magical assault. The entity begins gathering another sphere of dark energy high in the sky. The protagonist sprints toward the monster without hesitating for a second. The demon notices the sudden advance and is surprised by the warrior's speed. Tenma calls out to Yuna so they can immediately execute their planned strategy. Brilliant magical chains erupt from the earth and rise like spears toward the enemy. The mana restraints bind the creature's arms and body, immobilizing its movements. Yuna channels all her strength into holding the chains and signals for Tenma to attack. The protagonist pushes off the ground and leaps toward the monster with sword in hand. In midair, he assumes the classic slashing stance inherited from Kirishima's dojo. Tenma unleashes the powerful straight line slash, bobbed in pure cutting energy. The vertical strike splits the air in half and hits the demonic aberration's body head on. Landing firmly on the ground, the young man celebrates, believing that he has finished the battle. A monstrous growl echoes directly behind him and makes the young hunter shudder with tension. The demon appears again in its colossal wolf form, towering over the protagonist. Tenma swallows hard when he realizes that his opponent withstood his best attack. He realizes the creature transformed at the moment of impact to reduce the damage it suffered. The beast's gigantic paws rip apart Yuna's restraining chains. The girl screams desperately, warning Tenma to watch out for the counterattack. The beast opens its enormous jaws and gathers a gigantic mass of destructive energy inside its mouth. A devastating blast of evil power fires point-blank at Tenma. Several dark projectiles bombard the ground, while the young man runs to avoid being hit. Tenma is stunned to see the monster combine physical strength and magic at the same time. A colossal explosion of purple energy detonates directly in front of the young man. The violent shockwave drags the warrior backward and sends dust and stones flying. Tenma covers his head with his arms and tries to recover from the crushing impact. Yuna raises her hands and creates a magic circle to try supporting her companion. Catching his breath, Tenma advances again in search of any opening in the enemy's defense. He leaps ferociously and delivers another straight line strike against the creature's chest. The blade slices through the beast's hide, creating a major impact of sparks and energy. The monster recoils from the impact and crushes the ground, creating a crater of destruction. Tenma retreats to the top of a rock and groans with exhaustion from the duel's intensity. The creature opens a colossal magical energy rift, ready to obliterate the warrior. Tenma reflexively leaps away before the attack pulverizes his position. Continuous beams of demonic power completely devastate the surrounding terrain. The protagonist grits his teeth, knowing that they will lose if the battle drags on too long. Tenma looks to the side in alarm, concerned about Yuna's safety amid the attacks. The exhausted huntress grits her teeth and realizes that her mana reserves are nearly depleted. The protagonist lands on the ground and notices dark pieces of the monster scattered across it. The black mass bubbles on the earth, unable to regenerate or return to the original body. He is relieved to confirm that his sword attacks truly are working against the demon. Determined to end the battle, he rushes forward at maximum speed in search of the perfect moment. Tenma approaches the demonic boss, aware that he needs only one decisive blow. He delivers a cutting strike to the wolf's flank, making the monster roar in agony. In response, the beast crushes the earth with its colossal claws and tries to flatten the hunter, sliding backward to create distance. The young man remembers that he possesses an extremely powerful technique. The Soul Devourer sword shines blue and releases the special ability of its accumulated souls. He knows that he will have only 5 seconds of power before the blade's effect ends. Tenma calls out to Yuna as the girl runs hurriedly across the ruined battlefield. Confused, she asks why he is running toward her in the middle of the crossfire. Without hesitation, the young man grabs Yuna and carries her over his shoulders while dodging the explosions. He asks her to use teleportation magic to position them high above the beast's head. She warns that she only has enough mana for one final jump, but Tenma replies that this is more than enough. An explosion strikes the ground and forces the two to act quickly before the flames swallow them. Yuna desperately brings her hands together and activates her spatial magic to save both their lives. An intense light forms high above and opens a magical passage in the heavens over the monster. The place where they stood is completely pulverized by the beast's magical blasts. The air begins cracking into luminous fragments directly above the enemy. The two fall straight through the dimensional portal and suddenly appear high in the sky. The girl screams in terror during the free fall as she clings tightly to his back. Tenma activates the Soul Devourer's soul release and covers the blade in immense blue power. The system confirms the maximum increase in the strike's range and destructive power. The spiritual projection of his master appears behind him and guides his flawless swordsmanship stance. The young man executes the colossal straight line slash and creates a gigantic blade of pure light. The immense cutting column descends from the sky with overwhelming force and tears through the clouds and darkness. The attack strikes the beast's head on and splits the demonic boss's colossal body in half. A system window confirms to everyone that the fearsome demon has finally been defeated. All the aberration's evil energy and remains dissolve into black smoke on the ground. Yuna falls onto the grass and struggles to breathe after completely exhausting her mana. Looking at the young man beside her, she wonders who he truly is behind that absurd power. The huntress grows intrigued and wonders why he concealed such impressive talents. Tenma celebrates internally when he sees the notification that he has finally reached D rank. She gets up and tells the young man to rise, but he jokingly admits that he can barely move. Yuna assumes a serious expression and warns that they will be in trouble if they do not leave immediately. Several surviving wolves surround the clearing and stare at the two with glowing eyes in the darkness. The remaining beasts bare their fangs and growl furiously, ready to attack without mercy. Tenma asks her to hold off the creatures for only 5 minutes while he catches his breath. Yuna drinks an intermediate recovery potion to restore her depleted magical energy. A powerful fiery aura erupts around her as she demands an incredibly expensive dinner as her reward. Lying on the grass, Tenma smiles in relief, knowing that even 1 minute will be enough. A colossal explosion of flames consumes the entire area and sweeps the monsters from the forest. The other guild members watch the distant flash in amazement at the huntress's power. The system message announces the quest's success and the irregular gate's permanent release. Mai raises her arms and shouts with joy. Celebrating the fact that they survived, the group walks back toward the exit. While Yuna demands the banquet Tenma promised her, the girl releases his arm with a gentle smile and announces that she can walk on her own now. Tenma returns the pieces of armor, all dented and destroyed by the fierce confrontation. Sejima tearfully laments the equipment's condition, while Mai gives thanks that they escaped alive. Yuna informs the hunters that the association will contact them to collect the official report. The mage then politely asks Tenma for his real name. The protagonist calmly invents a false identity and says that his name is Busen Gariki. Mai bows in gratitude, leaving Yuna beside him deeply suspicious. The girl whispers in his ear and asks whether he is a fugitive because he is hiding his name. Tenma reflects that his absurd rate of growth would attract far too much attention from major guilds. He knows that his journey will end if the demons infiltrating society set their sights on him. For that reason, he decides to remain discreet until he is strong enough to protect himself. Yuna realizes his intention and asks whether he wants her to alter the official report. She agrees to help, acknowledging that the young man prevented an immense tragedy inside the gate. Tenma sincerely smiles and thanks her, saying that the favor will be an enormous help. Seeing the young man's friendly expression, the huntress grows shy and blushes slightly. She says goodbye and casually reminds him that he still owes her a good dinner. Tenma calls her back, making the girl's heart race with anticipation. Thoroughly embarrassed, Yuna fixes her hair and asks what he wants to say. He merely asks for a magical teleportation ride home while wearing those clothes. Disappointed by the unromantic request, she gives him a deadly, irritated glare. Yuna abruptly activates teleportation and hurls the protagonist through the portal. The next day, the sun rises over the city and brings a peaceful atmosphere. Tenma wakes in his bed and stretches, his body completely rejuvenated by the recovery. He smiles in satisfaction and concludes that his passive ability is practically a cheat. A single night's rest already provided 35% experience for his technique. In addition to reaching D rank, he can now surpass the level limits of all his abilities. Suddenly, the phone on his bed begins vibrating and draws the young man's attention. Looking at the screen, he sees 4 missed calls from Hiroki Gondo, his former agency boss. The young man considers ignoring them because he no longer intends to accept temporary hunting jobs. Opening his magical inventory, he decides to inspect the rewards obtained in the dungeon. The young man materializes an extremely pure golden mana crystal in his hands. He estimates that he can sell the rare stone for an excellent price on the market, but the system window announces the quest's completion and the unlocking of a special shop. Curious, he accesses the menu and realizes that this is no ordinary system store. It is the causality reversal shop, where accumulated points replace experience. He notices that only the consumable items section is currently available for purchases. Among the available options is a potion capable of pointing the way toward treasure. Trusting that the system has never given him anything harmful, he decides to test the new item. The protagonist spends his 500 available points to purchase the treasure potion. The blue bottle appears in his hands and reveals its effect of guiding the user toward riches for 1 hour. Thinking that money is essential for exploring gates, he decides to drink the liquid all at once. Without hesitation, Tenma tips back the bottle and swallows all its gleaming contents. At first, nothing seems to change, and he begins to think that the effect failed. Suddenly, A bluish flame bearing a money symbol appears floating above his head. The spiritual fire moves through the room and descends toward the protagonist's bed. The mysterious flame lands directly on Tenma's smartphone screen. The magical fire merges with the device and highlights the recent call notifications. The energy points directly to Hiroki Gondo's name, suggesting that he returned the call. The young man calls back and answers, hearing the furious shouts of his former supervisor. The man angrily roars that Tenma must come to the office immediately if he wants to stay alive. Realizing where the opportunity for profit lies, Tenma gives a sly smile at the situation. Suddenly, someone appears before the protagonist and aggressively asks what he just said. Unfazed by the provocation, he simply answers the phone and calmly tells the person to wait exactly where they are. Following the mysterious blue flames trail, Tenma calmly walks toward the building containing the agency's office. He enters the dark place and follows the light as it continues floating down the corridor to guide him to his final objective. The blue flame stops directly in front of a door, revealing that the treasure acquisition potion's effect is active and ready. Tenma calmly opens the door, wondering whether any kind of wealth could truly be hidden in such a simple place. At that instant, a glass shatters and someone begins shouting, calling the protagonist a useless bastard. The supervisor, Hiroki Gondo, appears in a fury and demands an explanation for why he ignored his calls and ruined a major deal. Gondo then orders his henchmen to teach the young man a good lesson and straighten him out, as they did in the past. The young hunter merely watches the scene, remembering that the supervisor was only an ordinary person who exploited his former weakness. The system activates memory search and brings back memories of the cowardly beatings he used to receive from those men. He perfectly remembers Masato Kido and Taje Kamigawa, 2D rank hunters responsible for his worst moments. Taiji arrogantly grabs the young man by the collar and asks what he is staring at with that strange expression. In the background, Supervisor Gondo loses patience with the young man's attitude and orders his henchman to hurry up and beat some sense into him. The henchman mocks Tenma and says that he still does not understand the gravity of the situation he got himself into. But the protagonist knows that he is now on an entirely different level. While those henchmen's abilities are extremely low, he activates his strength skill and grips his opponent's wrist with crushing pressure and complete ease. With one quick movement, Tenma effortlessly hurls the brute across the room. The man flies away and breaks a bookshelf full of books, leaving the other henchman and the supervisor utterly shocked. Angered by his partner's defeat, Kido charges and throws a violent punch toward the young man's face. Thanks to his activated perception skill, the protagonist sees the attack in slow motion and dodges without difficulty. He uses his martial arts techniques to deliver a precise and incredibly powerful counterattack against his assailant. The blow sends the henchman straight to the floor, completely unconscious and unable to react. Gondo panics and desperately shouts for the other henchman to get up and fight properly. Consumed by hatred, the brute Taiji begins concentrating his strength and tears his own clothes in the process. He activates his maximum body strength amplification ability, completely changing in size and becoming gigantic. The giant charges with everything he has and launches a devastating attack at the protagonist, who remains motionless. Showing no concern, Tenma simply lands a direct, crushing punch on his opponent's face. The impact is so brutal that the giant is violently hurled backward and ends up running over his own boss. Gondo lets out an agonized groan as his defeated henchman's heavy body crushes him. Looking at the two lying on the ruined floor, Tenma coldly announces that he will end their careers as hunters once and for all. The young man approaches the terrified supervisor and asks what he intended to do, leaving the man trembling with fear. Gondo tries to threaten him by saying that he will not get away with this, because he knows everyone important in the small industry. Tenma simply raises his foot threateningly above the man's head, demonstrating that he does not care about the threats at all. A short while later, the three bullies appear kneeling on the floor, begging for mercy and apologizing for everything they did. The young man demands repayment for the taxi fares the supervisor unfairly deducted from his daily wages, making him even more desperate. With that problem resolved, he begins looking around and trying to discover where the valuable treasure indicated by the blue flame might be. He notices that the mysterious light is floating directly before a large bookcase filled with old books. The protagonist begins removing books from the shelf to reveal what is hidden behind them. Behind the volumes appears a high-security electronic safe, shining brightly beneath the blue flame's mark. He points at the device and asks whether the secret is inside while the supervisor nervously sweats as he watches. Receiving an intimidating glare from the protagonist, the man immediately shrinks back and apologizes without a second thought. Gondo thinks the secret is safe because the vault has a complex 20-digit password that is impossible to decipher. However, the system window appears and reveals that every security password has been completely cleared and bypassed. Tenma wonders whether he will actually find something of extreme value inside that qualifies as a good treasure. Wasting no time, the young man begins entering the numbers indicated by the system to open the electronic lock. The safe door opens and reveals a stack of important documents and envelopes filled with money. Before a shocked Gondo, the protagonist realizes that he found a ledger containing all the agency's illegal earnings. He also finds a special mana crystal key that can be sold for a genuine fortune on the open market. Tenma collects the valuable items, but cannot avoid thinking that the situation looks much more like a robbery. He examines an investigation report about a Yokohama dungeon that requires mental resistance against a powerful barrier at the entrance. Tenma immediately recognizes the mysterious gate and realizes that he can make a genuine fortune if everything goes according to plan. Gondo desperately begs the young man not to take the document, revealing that he spent a great deal of money preparing to explore the location. The young man merely gives a confident smile and says that he will decide for himself whether he is capable of entering the dungeon. Suddenly, the office door opens and reveals the imposing figure of a mysterious long-haired man in a white lab coat. The man calmly enters the messy office and remarks that he did not expect to find someone there before him. The protagonist is shocked when he meets the newcomer's gaze and immediately recognizes that distinctive presence. The mysterious man calmly approaches Tenma and asks whether the young hunter knows exactly who he is dealing with. He remembers Kyosuke Sengoku, a true living legend whose name absolutely everyone knew in that devastated world. Sengoku smirks and reveals that he also knows Tenma's identity, calling him a talentless F-rank hunter. The man mentions his humiliating nickname, the fill-in, while watching the young man hold the valuable dungeon report. Sengoku directs his intelligent gaze toward the destroyed bookcase where the secret safe was completely breached. Without hesitation, the protagonist holds out the document and directly asks whether this is exactly what he was seeking. The legendary hunter is slightly surprised by Tenma's clever move and asks how he managed to discover his intentions. Lying on the floor, Supervisor Gondo panics and desperately shouts, begging them not to hand over the paper. With no patience for noise, Sengoku lands a short, precise kick directly on the noisy supervisor's face. With a single simple blow, the man knocks out the supervisor, who collapses unconscious on the office floor. The elite hunter asks why the supervisor lied and claimed that he did not have the paper Sengoku had sought for so long. Sengoku thanks the protagonist for his cooperation and says that he would like properly repay the enormous help another time. The man holds out a mysterious card and instructs the young hunter to call that specific number within 1 week. Tenma accepts the card and is stunned to realize that he has received a living legend's direct personal contact information. He remembers that Kyosuke Sengoku is an S-rank hunter and the leader of an influential intelligence group respected by everyone. He was considered a true hero who used his impressive intelligence network to anticipate the dangers of the demonic invasion. Before leaving, the white-haired man praises the protagonist and says that he is a truly fascinating person. Son Goku slowly walks away, while thinking about how surprised he is to have been deceived by the young man's appearance. Continues reflecting on Tenma's behavior and emphasizes how intriguing and mysterious he finds the young hunter. The bespectacled man is impressed to realize that even he was completely fooled by the protagonist's disguise. Sengoku reveals that he already knows the truth about who resolved the Night Crow Guild incident. Despite the association's attempt to cover it up, he reassures the young man that he has no intention of blackmailing him as he begins disappearing into the air. The S-rank hunter merely admits that he is curious about the young man's motives and would love to hear the story at their next meeting. With a final wave, Sengoku vanishes completely inside a curtain of smoke, leaving Tenma alone in the destroyed office. Examining the card in his hands, the protagonist celebrates internally, knowing that obtaining the contact was a genuine stroke of luck. Immediately afterward, a system notification appears on the screen and informs him that he has acquired a new passive luck skill. The panel explains that the new technique increases the odds of good fortune and significantly improves his day-to-day luck. He realizes that having this ally will greatly simplify his search for information about demons and accelerate his efforts to earn money. The report's magical glow completely fades, indicating that the treasure acquisition potion's effect has expired. Tenma opens the system's consumables menu and sees that the shop is currently out of new treasure potions. He remembers that another highly useful potion is available for purchase, but he will need to accumulate more system points first. Considering his next steps, he decides to focus on leveling up and use the money from the safe to purchase new equipment. The protagonist walks firmly through the busy commercial streets of Ryuzen, ready to spend his new savings. He enters a specialized hunter store and presents a detailed list of items he needs to purchase for his next journey, equipped with a gigantic backpack and expensive tools. He laments how much money he had to spend to prepare properly. Looking at his bank balance, the young man nearly cries when he realizes that he has only a little over 7,000 yen left. He tries to console himself with a forced smile, thinking that all the absurd spending is actually an excellent investment in the future. Sometime later in Yokohama, he prepares near the mountains, focused on making much more money from his new exploration mission. Holding his hunter's pickaxe, the protagonist takes a deep breath before an abandoned dungeon entrance carved into the rock. He descends the stone steps and confirms the dungeon truly has a powerful mental barrier instead of ordinary guard monsters. Tenma knows that an ordinary hunter attempting to cross the purple barrier unprepared would lose their sanity or enter a vegetative state. As soon as he takes his first step toward the gate, the young man feels crushing mental pressure and groans in pain from the impact. The system then activates his passive mental strength skill, helping him resist the magic attempting to destabilize his emotions. He begins hearing cruel voices echoing in his mind, calling him a trash hunter and saying that he is nothing but dead weight. The protagonist grips his head tightly while the illusions continue relentlessly mocking his former weakness. He feels an overwhelming wave of negative emotions that seem to pull him directly back into the darkest period of his life. The mental voices continue screaming harsh insults, reminding him that even a simple goblin would be more useful than him on a mission. However, Tenma takes a deep breath and focuses on moving forward, activating mental strength to resist the psychological attacks. The young man continues advancing, and the system soon announces the rapid increase in the level of his valuable mental resistance technique. Though tired and panting, the protagonist braces a hand against the dark dungeon stone wall to maintain his balance and keep walking. He recognizes that he could never cross that terrible corridor without the active mental strength ability protecting him. The young hunter passes through a large stone gateway guarded by dark gargoyles and proceeds deeper into the silent ruins. Suddenly, he finds a far denser and more violent purple magical barrier completely blocking the path ahead. The young man finds it strange that he advanced so far into the dungeon without encountering a single monster along the way. Faced with the unusual situation, he activates memory search to retrieve the correct information from his previous life. He remembers that ancient records said only experienced C-rank hunters could approach that place's entrance. However, the truth was that a mental barrier existed inside that even S-rank hunters could not easily cross. Because of this, a powerful demon commander seized the gate in the future and drove all humanity to the brink of despair. Thanks to his memories, Tenma realizes that the legendary equipment the demon would use is hidden directly behind the barrier. Excited by the discovery, he concludes that the dungeon's items are exactly the key to earning an unbelievable fortune. The young man proceeds cautiously, knowing that beyond the powerful mental illusions, the path will be filled with deadly traps. Suddenly, the protagonist's sharpened senses trigger a maximum alert, indicating that something dangerous is about to happen. A secret trap activates, and suddenly fires a rain of deadly arrows toward him, forcing him to act quickly. He instantly activates perception and agility, and evades the arrows with impressive movements. Tenma recognizes that he would be in serious trouble without max-level perception and mental strength to help him. He observes the arrows embedded in the stone floor, knowing that a single millisecond of delay could have cost him his life. Understanding the danger, the young man focuses on sound so he can predict the trajectory of new attacks before even seeing them. At that moment, another massive volley of sharp arrows fires directly from the ceiling toward the young adventurer. With superhuman reflexes, he executes a perfect dodge, sliding across the damp floor and escaping another deadly trap unscathed. The young hunter moves with extreme elegance and precision, evading every projectile as though he already knows exactly where it will land. As he dodges an endless storm of attacks, the system announces that his mental strength skill has risen to level 6. The rain of arrows continues relentlessly, but the young man's resistance technique keeps evolving and quickly reaches level 7. He performs aerial acrobatics to avoid danger, while his mental ability rises to level 8 and grants him even greater focus. Enormous rocks begin falling from the ceiling, but the young man leaps between the debris as his technique reaches level 9. A gigantic stone drops directly behind him, forcing him to run at high speed, while his mental resistance reaches level 10. He slides beneath an enormous stone sphere, blocking the path, and celebrates his ability, rising to level 11. The system announces that the technique reached its maximum limit, unlocking special effects and making him completely immune to the terrible attacks. A new message confirms that he now has total immunity to any type of spell or negative mental magic effect. Immediately afterward, a dense, mysterious purple smoke begins rising from the ground and quickly spreads throughout the dungeon corridor. The protagonist observes the magical mist surrounding him without the slightest concern, thanks to his new system protection effect. He remembers that the smoke marks the beginning of an illusion so powerful that even S-rank hunters would find it unbearable. He passes an illusion of a kneeling warrior, desperately begging to be killed and freed from the terrible suffering. Several fallen hunters appear screaming and suffering from the visions, but Tenma calmly walks among them completely unaffected. He realizes that the terrible apparitions are merely memories of real people from the past, but remains completely focused thanks to the system. The young hunter finally emerges from the dense purple mist and enters a gigantic, silent hall deep within the gate. Before him stands an imposing warrior in dark armor, wielding a gigantic sword and radiating a terrifying presence. Tenma draws his own weapon and realizes that this is the gate boss, whose defeat will secure the legendary item he desires. Suddenly, a powerful surge of blue electricity envelops the protagonist's sword, surprising him with the unusual reaction. The information window reveals that his Soul Devourer sword gained a new permanent attribute after absorbing the previous monster's energy. Confident in his sword skills, he charges at high speed toward the great armored warrior to begin the battle. The terrifying monster easily blocks the attack, creating a violent collision of dark energy that shakes the entire stone hall. The two trade rapid attacks in a spectacular sequence of blows, sending magical sparks flying in every direction. After retreating, Tenma is alarmed to notice that his physical attacks inflicted no damage on the opponent as he activates resilience. He notices that his opponent is not only durable, but can also imbue its sword with a powerful aura of dark magic. Suddenly, the dark energy around the enemy begins moving and summons two new armored warriors to help it fight. The protagonist prepares to face the new threats, wondering whether he can truly overcome the challenge at level 20. But a brilliant idea enters his mind as he wonders whether defeating the monsters summoned by the boss will grant him experience points. He concludes that his opponents will certainly grant experience, and that he can finally level up now that he has been promoted to D rank. With a confident smile, the young man activates his Xrd experience multiplier, knowing that the new monsters are the key to becoming stronger. Wasting no time, the young hunter charges at high speed and delivers rapid strikes against the armored warriors summoned by the boss. He activates his passive intimidation ability to waken the opponents all at once with a piercing, terrifying gaze. Using Kirishima's legendary sword style, he concentrates all his energy in his blade and delivers a devastating vertical slash to the opponent. The sword strike hits the additional warrior's head on, sending brilliant blue sparks flying throughout the dungeon's battle hall. Thanks to his special limit-breaking trait, the system automatically multiplies all his physical attributes. Defeating the summoned monsters activates his gigantic experience multiplier, and he begins leveling up at an absurd speed. The system message panel flashes continuously and announces that the young hunter reached level 30, as his body crackles with electricity. Furious over his minions' defeat, the gate's great boss summons a new horde of monsters in an attempt to contain the young man's advance. Tenma moves like lightning and cuts through the enemies with complete ease and such speed that they have no chance to counterattack. The young hunter leaps toward the ceiling, leaving a bright trail of blue energy behind him as he prepares another strike. He combines perception and martial arts to perfectly control his rapid movements in the air with maximum precision. With clean, accurate slashes, the young man eliminates the remaining minions within seconds and transforms them into pure experience energy. He lands softly on the stone floor, while the residual combat energy continues circulating around his strengthened body. The system continues accumulating multiplied experience and updates the protagonist to level 39 within moments. Upon reaching level 40, the young man notices that the enemies have finally stopped appearing, and the horde of minions has been completely destroyed. The protagonist calmly turns toward the great primary monster, remembering that only the dungeon boss remains to be faced. The giant advances and delivers a crushing strike with its dark blade, but the young hunter evades the devastating impact with complete agility. He activates his max-level Kirishima straight slash technique and concentrates an immense amount of magical energy in his powerful blade. With a quick movement, the young man unleashes a horizontal cutting attack that sends an explosion of brilliant blue energy toward the monster. The armored warrior tries to defend with its own weapon, producing a heavy metallic clang that echoes throughout the dungeon hall. The clash of magical energy between the two blades reaches its limit and creates an intense red flash that illuminates the entire battlefield. A colossal explosion of energy destroys the stone floor and hurls the dungeon boss backward with absolutely devastating force. The system announces that his sword absorbed the enemy's dark energy and increased its attack power, while the young man celebrates his growth. A new message says that upon reaching maximum level, the causality reversal system will begin providing special points instead of experience. With the great boss finally defeated, the system panel confirms the exploration quest's success and releases the proper rewards. The young hunter remembers that unlike ordinary gates, dungeons always guarantee valuable rewards for whoever manages to complete them. A golden light appears high in the hall, and the young man approaches curiously to discover which valuable item belonged to the ancient demon leader. The brilliant energy floats gently and lands lightly on the protagonist's outstretched hands as he observes the object. The object revealed within the golden light is a metal defense ring with a very simple appearance, but an unusual magical aura. Examining the plain accessory, he smiles and remembers that one should never judge a commanded item's true value solely by its outward appearance. The system reveals that the ring is unique rank and provides defense bonuses, although its primary functions remain incompletely sealed. He becomes highly excited to discover that it is an evolution-type item, knowing that his experience multiplication ability will be useful. The young man knows that evolution items become much stronger as they absorb the user's accumulated combat experience. The updated status panel shows that Tenma reached level 40 and now possesses 313 accumulated system points. A new special quest is unlocked to overcome the level restriction, and the young hunter eagerly waits to discover the next challenge. The D-rank quest objective is to collect 3 demonic sources to unlock new attribute limits and release even stronger techniques. He wonders whether the system knows his true plans to prevent the world's destruction, the primary reason for his return to the past. The young man reflects that the quests are far too precise to be mere coincidence as he considers the delay in the demon's invasion. He recalls that the evil forces took time to invade because Earth's environment was entirely different from the demons' terrible world. To prepare for the invasion, the demons needed to scatter profane relics containing highly concentrated evil energy throughout various regions. By placing sources of dark energy at strategic locations, the creatures of darkness planned to alter Earth's climate and facilitate their attack. He remembers the shocking testimony of a traitorous hunter who secretly allied with the demons before being taken to trial. The traitor mocked the humans and said they were wrong to believe that the terrible invasion began suddenly and without warning. He ironically revealed that the demons had been preparing for war long before any human noticed the threat in the shadows. He recalls that the demons were gathering sources of profane energy to plan Earth's devastation through the demonic energy project. The traitor cried desperately before everyone and swore that he truly did not know those cruel creatures' actual intentions. The man on trial claimed that he never imagined the demons were secretly planning the complete elimination of the entire human race. But the guillotine blade fell mercilessly and delivered the man's final punishment without any chance of mercy or forgiveness. Back in the present, Tenma concludes that destroying the energy sources is the best possible strategy for stopping the plans to invade the real world. With his next objective fully defined, the young man smiles excitedly and decides to check the rewards prepared by the system. A new system notification flashes on the screen and announces that a valuable item is being generated because of his special limit break. He eagerly watches the intense blue light shine, wondering what powerful weapon he will receive this time after reaching the current level limit. The protagonist is completely dazzled when the strong magical glow begins revealing the silhouette of a weapon much larger than he expected. He firmly grips a legendary blue spear that radiates extremely powerful freezing energy throughout the hall. 1 week passes, and the young hunter calmly walks toward the gigantic, modern building of the Elite Hunter Training Center. The young man admires the city's beautiful, peaceful view and vows that he will never let the demons destroy the world again. He picks up his phone to check the latest notifications and messages received from his acquaintances during the past few days of rest. The young man laughs at the dozens of accumulated messages from Yuna demanding food and decides to ignore them all for now to avoid a headache. He approaches the renowned facility's main entrance while watching other experienced warriors prepare for their training sessions. The protagonist smiles, remembering that he never imagined he would someday enter such a prestigious training center. He knows that he could not afford it before because he was broke. But now that he has a generous budget in yen, he can finally use the elite facility. Suddenly, the thunderous sound of a speeding car engine echoes through the courtyard and immediately draws the young hunter's attention. A flashy red sports car appears drifting and careens toward the young man, forcing him to act within a fraction of a second. Using his active level 10 perception, he makes an agile leap and perfectly avoids being run over by the speeding vehicle. The protagonist is furious over the dangerous maneuver and shouts, asking whether the driver was trying to kill him in the pedestrian area. The sports car's door slowly opens and reveals the mysterious driver who wore a hood to cover his face during the drift. Tenma waits in a combat stance with dagger in hand while the man exits the red vehicle and slowly approaches beneath the sun. The mysterious driver studies the young man and shows immense surprise upon recognizing the young hunter before him. The two hunters silently stare at each other in the courtyard while the people around them watch the tension following the near accident. The driver approaches and begins shouting in surprise, looking extremely excited to see the protagonist standing before his wide eyes. He removes the hood, revealing the talented Teo Kirishima, who grins from ear to ear upon finding his master there. Taiyu proudly displays his new luxury vehicle and reveals that he bought it with the generous signing bonus from his new guild. The blue-haired young man says that he is now part of the powerful Guardian Guild, one of the most prominent organizations in the country. He is part of one of the 3 leading guilds that dominate the national hunter scene and set the rules for elite gates. The protagonist deduces that the young man's signing bonus must have been a gigantic fortune for him to afford the luxury sports car. Tenma sighs and directly asks him to stop calling him master, but Kirishima is confused and questions the demand. The protagonist explains that the title sounds like far too heavy a burden, while the blue-haired young man tries to think of an acceptable alternative. The young man awkwardly scratches his head and says that calling him Big Brother also seems strange, suggesting that he choose any other name. Taiyo grows thoughtful and remarks that adding Mr. to the protagonist's name does not suit his fighting style at all either. The young hunter tries to say goodbye politely and continue on his way, but his devoted companion's persistent call interrupts him. The blue-haired boy runs after the protagonist, begging him to wait 1 minute while leaving his luxury car parked behind them. Inside reception, Tenma is alarmed by the training room's exorbitant prices and decides to rent only the basic A-rank room to save money. Without him noticing, young Kirishima appears at the service desk and holds out his high-limit VB card to cover every expense. The smiling receptionist announces that she will guide both hunters directly to the facility's most expensive and exclusive VIP training room. Seeing the astronomical price of 3 million yen displayed on the screen, the protagonist freezes completely and stares with his jaw dropped. Kirishima gives him a friendly wink and asks whether he would like to train together, leaving the young man quite grateful for his disciples' help. They enter the immense VIP hall, equipped with modern holographic targets shaped like floating magical dragons and perfect for target practice. Using all his physical strength, the protagonist throws his new magical spear, which travels at high speed and instantly destroys the holographic target. Immediately after the devastating impact, the weapon dissolves into pure blue light and spectacularly returns to the young hunter's hands. The young man catches the spear with agility, impressed by the unique weapon's incredible ease of recovery in battle. The system window reveals that it is the unique rank recovery spear, which instantly returns to the user's hand at a mental command. Kirishima watches the demonstration, fascinated by the new spear's power, and excitedly asks what other hidden combat techniques it possesses. The system announces that his throwing skill reached level 11, drastically increasing the damage and accuracy of his future weapon throws. Tenma concludes with satisfaction that the spear temporarily surpasses his primary sword in destructive power and is perfect as a quick secondary weapon. Holographic monsters roar throughout the training room while Tenma and Taiyo Kirishima observe the threats. Taiyo Kirishima swiftly leaps toward the enemies, thinking that he cannot fall behind his master. The young man unleashes fierce strikes against the airborne holograms with a determined shout. Kirishima attacks with his sword and aggressively cuts through the great holographic beast. Tenma watches in amazement and thinks that he could never imitate the sword saint's techniques. Taiyo lands wielding both blades while the protagonist follows his movements. Kneeling on the floor, the young hunter appears disappointed upon realizing that his strike did not go as planned. Kirishima asks Tenma to demonstrate the straight line slash once again, while the young man notices the flaw in his strike. Tenma explains that he must connect heaven and earth and continue turning the sword, leaving his disciple confused. The protagonist leaps high toward the ceiling to demonstrate the ability's correct execution. Tenma executes the midair slash and tells him to do it this way, while the system announces that the ability reached 100%. The limit break grants a vast amount of experience and evolves the straight line slash to level 11. The impact creates such a powerful gust of wind that Kirishima struggles to shield his face. Tenma gently descends to the floor with his sword, completely enveloped in intense blue energy. Taiyo runs over and grabs Tenma around the waist in excitement, deciding to name the move that Tsukishiro style straight line slash. The young man praises the technique's evolution and says that it is incredible for someone to improve an ability this way. Tenma's phone suddenly begins ringing and interrupts the boy's excitement in the room. The phone screen displays a call from Kyosuke Sengoku demanding the protagonist's immediate attention. Tenma thanks him for use of the room and says that he needs to leave to handle an emergency, confusing the young man. Kirishima silently watches his master walk through the doors and hurry down the corridor. Alone in the room, the young man clenches his fist, determined to master the Tsukishiro style straight line slash once and for all. In a quiet cafe, Kyosuke Sengoku thanks Tenma for their recent successful cooperation. The intelligence leader explains that his guild's positions changed considerably thanks to him, like a stroke of luck. Sengoku places his cup on the table and firmly declares that he intends to repay the favor in his own way. The silver-haired man calmly emphasizes that his guiding principle is never to remain indebted to anyone. Tenma stares silently at the leader and carefully considers the conversation's true purpose. The young man remembers that in the past ruined world, this man acted as a ruthless information broker. In that cold memory, Kyosuke made it clear that he was humanity's ally, but demanded valuable information in exchange for his cooperation. Tenma recalls that he was entirely different from the other heroes and calculated everything with cold precision. The protagonist concludes that Kyosuke acts solely out of self-interest and realizes that he must currently be highly useful to him. Tenma pulls a duffel bag onto the table and asks whether he is certain that he wants to repay the favor now. Kyosuke curiously opens the bag, and Tenma reveals that it contains the mana crystals taken from Gondo's secret dungeon. The young man places the tray full of gleaming stones on the table and says that he wants to negotiate the batch with him. Tenma makes it clear that he intends to conduct regular transactions involving these goods from now on. The protagonist knows that trading so many crystals requires trust, but is certain that the man will not refuse the profit. Sengoku immediately accepts the deal and reiterates that he never goes back on his promise to help however necessary. Tenma celebrates the treasure potion's effect and pulls out a folded sheet of paper, saying that he needs one more important favor. Kayasuke opens the page and notices that it contains a detailed list of names, places, and rare items. The young man reflects that he wrote down everything he remembered from the future to try locating the source of demonic energy. Tenma gravely asks the man to use his incredible search abilities to locate every target on the list. Kayasuke carefully examines the list and remarks that he would love to help, but the investigation is far larger than expected. Tenma smiles and asks whether he can lend a hand, and the intelligence leader immediately agrees to the request. Sengoku calls Tenma a D-rank mercenary, surprising the young man because he already knows his secret classification. The man explains that he is preparing a special dungeon restricted to D rank and needs someone experienced like him. Taking the tablet in his hands, Tenma understands that he has finally reached the real reason Kayasuke arranged the meeting. Sengoku displays a picture of a large, gleaming diamond and says that he urgently needs him to retrieve the Jewel of Eldoria. Tenma rests a hand on his chin in intrigue, feeling that the Jewel of Eldoria's name is quite familiar from his memories. The young man asks whether he will participate in the incursion alone, but Sengoku clarifies that other talented D-rank hunters will join him. The leader warmly asks whether Tenma would like to meet his teammates before they leave for the gate. Tenma cordially greets the group members, while curiously noticing the elite hunter's potential. Tenma meets the other team members, and everyone decides to briefly introduce themselves before the mission. Masayoshi Yakumo introduces himself as the group's tank and asks everyone to trust his defense during attacks. Tenma recognizes the man from his previous life and remembers that he was known for cruelly abusing rookies. A shy young man named Jin Yozaki introduces himself and reveals that he uses lightning magic in combat. The protagonist recalls that the young man would become a terrible psychopathic villain responsible for taking many lives in the future. The group's young woman says that she uses daggers as her primary weapons, while Tenma thinks about how Sengoku chooses only useful people. The girl notices Tenma's fixed stare and irritably asks why he keeps looking at her. She says that they should simply finish the job quickly without wasting time, finally making the young man remember her identity. Tenma says the name Akane Hoshimori, completely surprising the girl because he already knows her. The protagonist smiles in relief when he realizes that Sengoku placed at least one decent person on the team. He remembers the suffering of the ruined world, where the traumas of war eventually drove people insane. The strangest survivors included the eccentrics, and the girl belonged to that mysterious group. At the time, she survived solely by robbing anyone in her path, without distinguishing between monsters and humans. Akane asks whether something is on her face and demands to know who the hunter truly is. Tenma calmly replies that he is a D-rank hunter specializing in swords and spears in combat. Yakumo laughs loudly and invites every member to enter the special dungeon together. The group walks to the top of the hill and advances toward the brilliant golden gate ahead. Tenma crosses the magical rift as a system notification confirms his entry into the special dungeon. The system verifies that every team member meets the mandatory requirement of holding D rank or lower. The protagonist opens his eyes and is greeted by an intense, suffocating brightness on the other side. They find an immense, scorching desert beneath a searing sun that stretches to the horizon. While Akane and Jin complain about the extreme heat, Yakumo opens his inventory to retrieve cooling kits. The tank removes a magical ice box capable of relieving the desert environment's high temperature. Tenma realizes that Sengoku provided them with information in advance and concludes that Yakumo was assigned as leader. Akane celebrates the cooler temperature, while Yakumo tells everyone to remain vigilant and advance cautiously. The group begins marching through the desert information as they explore the mysterious sandy region. Tenma asks everyone to stop immediately, drawing all his teammates' attention. The protagonist activates his level 10 perception and warns that magical monsters are directly ahead. Yakumo places a hand above his eyes and looks forward but cannot see anything at all. The leader arrogantly declares that he will block any attack with his shield and tells everyone to simply follow him. The sand suddenly explodes and reveals giant scorpions emerging to attack the team. Yakumo admits that Tenma's vision was accurate when he sees the monsters erupt furiously from the ground. The warrior wields his axe and shield and firmly orders everyone to remain behind his defense. Yakumo activates his level 5 taunt ability and draws the attention of every enemy in the area. The scorpions let out piercing shrieks and charge toward the warrior who provoked them. The tank firmly positions his shield and withstands the magical beast's violent impacts. Yozaki concentrates electrical energy between his hands and warns his allies to clear a path for the shot. The young mage fires a powerful blue lightning bolt that strikes the group of monsters clustered on the sand. The electrical explosion sweeps the battlefield, scattering blue sparks and raising a massive cloud of dust. A cane swiftly leaps through the smoke with blades in hand to finish the remaining enemies. With swift, precise slashes, the girl cuts apart several scorpions at once with extreme agility. The defeated monsters fall scattered across the ground, while the girl lands softly on the sand dunes. Yakumo praises the girl's flawless performance, and she sheathes her blades while disdainfully saying that it was nothing. Tenma discreetly applauds, thinking that the group is highly efficient, and he will not even need to fight there. Yakumo approaches and irritably demands to know why Tenma is not at least pretending to help in battle. The earth begins shaking violently, alarming Tenma as he prepares for an imminent new threat. A cane tenses at the sudden tremor, while Tenma shouts a warning that something gigantic is approaching. A colossal pincer unexpectedly emerges from the sandy ground and surrounds the unsuspecting young huntress's feet. The enormous claw captures a cane in midair and hurls the other companions away with the impact's violence. A gigantic, monstrous scorpion emerges from the depths, raising the captured girl as it roars ferociously. Yakumo tries to use taunt, but the system announces that the technique failed because of the monster's enormously higher level. Seeing his companions panic, Tenma crouches on the sand, ready to intervene in the battle. The protagonist recalls the dark past, when he awakened his young friend Kalya in the middle of a ruined camp. In that memory, Tenma asked the boy to remain quiet, so that no one would see them sneaking out at night. The young man dug a hole through the rubble, making the boy curious about the reason for the sudden excavation. Tenma pointed to the bottom of the hole with a smile and asked the child to look at what was hidden there. The buried bucket contained several rare candies and juices that filled the child with joy. He explained that he worked very hard to collect all the treasures and give them to the boy as a present. Young Tenma smiled warmly, remembering that the special day was his little companion's birthday. The boy cried with happiness and thanked him from the bottom of his heart for the unexpected gesture. Tenma advised him to eat everything in secret, to avoid drawing the other camp survivors' attention. Suddenly, a surprise blow violently struck the boy's face in the middle of the darkness. The masked thief appeared crouching over the boy's fallen body, ready to steal all the supplies. Tenma immediately recognized the intruder and furiously shouted Hoshimori's name after the cowardly act. The girl flashed past him in the blink of an eye, giving him no chance to react. The swift blow struck Tenma brutally and knocked the young man to the ground with complete ease. The intruder collected all the food from the bucket, leaving both victims helpless on the stone floor. She calmly opened a can of soda while looking at her defeated victims. The thief casually drank the soda in front of them and mocked the effort they made to gather everything. In the end, Only torn wrappers and empty bottles remained scattered across the ruined ground. Kyoya cried desperately over the losses, while Tenma held his head in immense frustration. The young man never forgot the thief's icy stare as she devoured the food that was worth its weight in gold in the devastated world. Back in the present, a kind desperately cries for help while trapped in the monster's claw. The colossal beast roars menacingly and intimidates the other team members, who tremble with fear. Tenma sprints forward and shouts for Yakumo to raise his shield and block the creature's imminent attack. The protagonist races across the desert at high speed to save the team from the deadly danger. Yakumo uses all his strength to withstand the giant pincer's devastating impact against his shield. Tenma leaps into the air and activates his recovery spear, which materializes while shining with pure magical energy. The young hunter carefully aims, remembering that this species of monster has its weak point in its head. He activates level 11, throwing and fires the spear toward the target at astonishing speed. The luminous projectile passes through the creature from end to end and completely splits the giant monster in half. The beast's divided carcass falls lifeless and raises a large cloud of dust over the desert. Tenma pulls a kine from the hole by her ankles, while the dazed girl spits sand onto the ground. Yakumo and Jin stare in amazement at the ease of the kill and ask what kind of absurd power that was. Tenma narrows his eyes as he senses that something strange is still about to happen in the region. The ground begins shaking intensely and surprises the team once again amid the dunes. An immense crater opens in the center of the sand and swallows everything nearby into the abyss. The walls of sand violently collapse and drag the group toward the underground vortex. Yakumo recognizes the Antlion trap and desperately shouts for everyone to run out of the hole. A cane is swallowed by the sandy whirlpool and screams in despair that she is always the target of bad luck. Tenma smiles at the comical scene and thinks that this is nothing more than karma collecting on her future deeds. Two suited men observe the confusion from atop the hill and discuss the guild that invaded the location. They agree to avoid direct confrontation and merely secure the demonic source under orders from their guild master. A mysterious man touches their shoulders from behind and warns that their idea is completely wrong. The startled subordinate turns around, while the man asks whether they should not silently kill everyone. Riku, Himuro of the villainous Black Knot Guild, appears laughing and calls his companions idiots for letting such an opportunity pass. The Black Knot is known throughout the country as a respectable mid-sized guild in the eyes of the general public. Behind its noble facade, the guild conceals a brutal history of murders and massacres inside dungeons. The faction consists exclusively of criminal hunters who systematically commit theft and murder. At headquarters, the leader receives word that Riku Himuro entered the dungeon, and the rival guild's presence has been confirmed in the luxurious office. Hiroki Igarashi asks his subordinate whether he relayed the correct orders to the group. The Black Knot leader, known as humanity's future traitor, ordered the massacre of anyone in their path. The assistant swallows hard and fearfully confirms that every violent instruction was transmitted. The man hurriedly leaves the room, abandoning the leader to his dark thoughts. Hiroki remains seated in silence as the office door gently closes. Overcome with fury, the leader slams his fist into the desk and breaks the wood into several pieces. He is outraged that an unknown guild gained possession of the dungeon before his men. The man trembles in fear at the thought that the mysterious person will kill him if they lose the demonic source. Atop the dungeon's cliffs, the guild's envoys observe the activity in the desert valley. Riku Himuro cracks his knuckles and asks his companions why they should keep the intruders alive. The squad leader tries to assert his authority and warns that he will not tolerate trouble during the mission. In a fraction of a second, Riku brutally charges and grabs the man's face with deadly force. The killer crushes his companion's head against the rocky ground without showing any hesitation. The lifeless body falls bloodied onto the sand, revealing the hunter's ruthless cruelty. The other subordinate screams in despair after witnessing his own partner's brutal execution. The survivor questions the madness of the attack, and Riku coldly replies that they must die there. Riku wipes the blood from his face and mockingly asks whether he truly needs a reason to take a life. He gives a sinister smile and coldly declares that he kills simply because he finds it extremely entertaining. Terrified, the man tries to crawl backward in a futile attempt to escape the insane monster. Riku mocks the terror written across the subordinate's face and delights in his victim's agony. The man lets out one final desperate scream as the guild assassin coldly eliminates him. Riku remains standing atop the cliff, enjoying the wind after completing his solitary massacre. The killer adjusts his tie in satisfaction and concludes that only 4 targets remain to be hunted. He observes Tenma's team walking through the desert, eager to see the panic on each of their faces. At nightfall, the group gathers around a campfire while Akane shivers from the sudden drop in temperature. Yakumo shares his dream of founding a free guild in the future and invites those present to join him. Tenma silently remembers that the man's so-called free guild became a den of abuse and cruel murder. Yozaki refuses the invitation and says that he has other personal plans he intends to pursue alone. The protagonist looks at the young man, knowing very well that his plan was to kill innocent people with electricity. Akane also rejects the proposal and categorically states that she has no interest in guilds whatsoever. The girl proudly declares that she intends to join the association and become a great champion of justice. Tenma rises, finding it ironic that a future thief dreams of becoming a hero and draws the girl's attention. The young man walks into the darkness and simply says that he is going to explore the surroundings. Advancing through the dark vegetation, Tenma reflects that he cannot sit around waiting for sunrise. The protagonist activates memory search and remembers that the demonic source is inside the pyramid. His level 10 perception triggers a luminous alert warning that someone is following him. Tenma quickly turns and reaches out to capture the stealthy intruder in the darkness. He restrains the person's arm with extreme precision, leaving no room for escape or reaction. Akane cries out in pain when the young hunter surprises and subdues her from behind. Tenma is relieved to see that it is her, while the girl curiously complains that he noticed her hiding place. The young woman admits that she found the other too highly suspicious and preferred to trust her intuition and accompany him. Tenma concludes that her theft technique will be the perfect key to easily recovering the demonic source. He tells the girl to follow him closely while she tries to understand where they are going in the darkness. Before the immense pyramid, Tenma reveals that the thing she loves most is inside, leaving the young woman intrigued. Akane's danger sense issues a warning, and Tenma mocks her by recalling the trouble she had with the monster. The girl tries to justify herself in embarrassment, while Tenma firmly guarantees that she will not regret it. The protagonist turns away and begins climbing the stone steps toward the structure's entrance. Akane blushes while watching the young man, thinking that he is rather handsome, and decides to trust him for now. She runs up the stairs after him and warns that she will not forgive him if everything ends in disappointment. Tenma deduces that her danger sense failed earlier, because the system already knew he would save her in time. Entering the pyramid corridor, Akane remarks on the bad feeling she had from the moment they arrived. The young woman scratches her head in confusion upon realizing that the strange sensation suddenly disappeared. Tenma tells her to simply follow him without doing anything foolish, while his senses indicate something directly ahead. The protagonist tells the girl to keep up as his perception ability gains considerable experience. The system announces that perception reached level 11, allowing him to see his allies' system messages. Akane confidently runs ahead and says that she will demonstrate the effectiveness of her danger sense. The girl looks back and boasts that the path is completely clear and safe. A giant stone appears rolling behind her, making Tenma sarcastically ask whether she was merely running from the danger. Akane desperately runs and tells the young man to flee while he draws his sword with complete calm. Tenma unleashes a devastating strike of blue energy that slices the enormous boulder in half within an instant. The girl is shocked by the display of strength and asks whether he truly is a D-rank hunter. Tenma's newly enhanced perception activates and reveals a hidden passage directly beneath the stone floor. The ground cracks and collapses, revealing a large secret staircase leading into the pyramid's depths. Akane marvels at the discovered shortcut and wonders who this mysterious young man is. The two advance through the dark hall, while footsteps echo throughout the immense underground temple. The young woman looks at the enormous figure ahead and asks in surprise whether it is the dungeon boss. Before the giant Sphinx statue, Tenma remembers that the creature guards the valuable demonic source. The stone creature comes alive and announces the beginning of the sandstorm trial for the intruders. Several red magic circles begin shining intensely across the entire chamber floor. Violent flames erupt from the ground and surround the hunters with a storm of scorching fire. Amid Akane's panic, the young man points firmly and orders her to climb atop the Sphinx. Tenma swiftly leaps through the air and carries the girl away from the flames covering the ground. The two land safely on the colossal statues, head amid all the heat. Akane asks whether they should simply endure the explosions. But Tenma announces they will take a different approach. The young man gravely declares their plan is now to steal, shocking the girl. Akane asks what he wants to do, and Tenma replies that she must do exactly what she does best. The young man takes the girl's hand and directs against the stone, demanding that she use her abilities. Tenma displays the stolen wallet and reminds her that her unique technique allows her to steal anything. Exposed, the girl asks how he knows about her secret gift and hesitates to obey his orders. The Sphinx's eyes glow red as the creature concentrates an immense amount of magical energy. A massive explosion of flames engulfs the chamber's upper reaches and threatens to pulverize everything nearby. Tenma shouts for her to stop stalling and steal from the Sphinx immediately if she does not want to be eliminated. Desperate, Akane activates absolute plunder and touches the monument, regretting that she entered the place. Tenma unleashes his straight-line slash and destroys the shock wave created by the monster's power. The system reveals that Akane's level 4 absolute plunder successfully looted the Sphinx's rewards. Tenma admires the thief's overpowered gift while the monster panics as it sees its own body crumble. The creature tries to deliver its traditional riddle, but can barely finish the sentence amid its collapse. The gigantic Sphinx completely dissolves into ash before it can even finish the first challenge. Tenma mocks the girl's noble dream, and she counters that there is nothing wrong with stealing for a good cause. The system ends the trial and begins automatically distributing the defeated boss's rewards. An impressive rain of gold coins and a purple artifact falls upon the amazed girl. Akane holds the glowing cube in her hands and wonders what the demonic source is. Tenma reaches for the artifact while the young woman notices the dark aura radiating from it. The girl confirms her suspicions upon noticing the dangerous, evil energy concentrated within the cube. The protagonist promises to explain everything later and offers all the room's gold in exchange for the object. Fascinated by the sea of gold coins, Akane gladly accepts the offer and hands him the artifact. Tenma recovers the demonic source and receives a special bonus that increases his chance of acquiring rare techniques. The young man raises his Devourer's sword and splits the cube in half to absorb all the power within. The sword consumes the demonic energy and permanently raises its attack power to 30 points. Akane asks how he discovered her ability, and Tenma lies that he possesses a reading gift. Akane watches Tenma sheath the sword and thinks that beyond being handsome, he smells like money. The two return to camp, where the other teammates wait together. Yakumo suspiciously asks where they went alone so late at night. Tenma deflects the question by saying that he was giving life advice, and the girl immediately agrees. The leader crosses his arms and asserts his authority, forbidding anyone from acting without his prior permission. The group takes position at the pyramid entrance, focused on the objective of obtaining the Jewel of Aldoria. They advance through the tome's dark corridor. While hearing threatening sounds approaching, a large army of mummies appears in the hall and blocks the entire team's path. Tenma materializes his recovery spear, determined to exploit the moment and accumulate points. The luminous spear passes through several mummies in a straight line and defeats them all at once. Yakumo is impressed by Tenma's mastery of weapons and dreams of profiting from him in his guild. The warrior praises the young man's technique, and Tenma merely asks him to pay attention to the battle. Akane suspiciously whispers that he might not be D rank, but the young man reminds her of the gate's restriction. The team arrives before a gigantic cubic structure that draws everyone's attention. The enormous stone block cracks in half and collapses in pieces before the vigilant hunters. An immense sand golem emerges from the rubble, radiating a heavy, intimidating presence. Yakumo confidently advances and activates Taunt to draw the monster's attention. The golem delivers a devastating punch that brutally strikes the tank's raised shield. The violent impact breaks the warrior's defensive stance and hurls him backward onto the ground. Yakumo collides with the floor, completely unconscious and unable to continue fighting. Jin panics completely upon seeing the group leader defeated so easily. The creature ignores the fallen warrior and advances with heavy steps toward the young mage. Desperate, the boy fires a powerful electrical blast and shouts for the monster to stay back. The lightning beam strikes the golem's chest head-on, but it continues advancing without suffering any damage. Jin maximizes the flow of electrical mana in a futile attempt to contain the monster's charge. The monster leaps through the electricity and crushes the boy against the ground with a deadly crash. Akane is shocked and asks whether their companion died, while Tenma analyzes the beast. Protagonist deduces that the golem became so powerful by absorbing energy from the demonic source. Tenma tells the girl to run to the opposite side and prepare to repeat their previous strategy. The sand colossus leaps and raises both fists to deliver another crushing blow. The monster strikes the ground and raises a thick cloud of dust and debris through the hall. Activating level 11 perception and agility, Tenma perfectly evades all the debris. The young man advances with his blue blade and slices off the golem's arm at extreme speed. The young man leaps into the air, aware that he must destroy the central core to annihilate the creature. Tenma activates his sword's soul release to drastically increase the strike's range and damage. He unleashes a powerful straight-line slash that splits the sand golem's body in half. The beast's structure opens and reveals its gleaming core exposed amid the dust filling the hall. Tenma calls out to Akane to act at the exact moment of the opening. The young man orders her to use her ability to steal the creature's exposed core. The young huntress leaps and reaches out to activate her special absolute plunder technique. Tenma explains that stealing ownership of the core will deactivate the monster's magical functions. A notification warns that the level difference is far too great, and the plunder fails terribly. The sand instantly reforms, covering the core and reconstructing the golem over the girl. Akane freezes in terror, not knowing what to do, and Tenma shouts for her to run. Tenma pulls the girl away as the monster's colossal fist strikes the ground behind them. Activating level 11 strength and throwing, the protagonist prepares his weapon for another shot. He throws the spear directly at the monster while nimbly dodging its counterattack. Talentless adjustment activates in the heat of battle and grants him the weapons switch ability. The system allows him to instantly switch weapons, and Tenma wields his sword in midair. The young man's destructive power increases after the switch, while the golem's giant arm swings at him. Tenma advances and unleashes his powerful straight, line slash against the colossal golem. The monster roars upon feeling the devastating impact that shakes the entire room. Tenma activates weapon switch as his blade shines intensely. The system announces that weapon switch has already risen to level 2. The technique rapidly evolves to level 5 while he wields his spear. The switched weapon's destructive power increases by 15% for the attack. He delivers a massive blow that strikes the colossal monster directly in the chest. Switching to the Soul Devourer raises the ability to level 8. The damage bonus rises to 24% with one more lethal strike. He draws the recovery spear and causes the ability to reach level 10. Akane watches in surprise as the bonus reaches 30% and gains an additional effect. Tenma can now infuse magic directly into newly switched weapons. He channels all his power and fires the spear at the enemy's head. The attack pierces the monster and creates an explosion that shatters its stone body. A message confirms the boss's defeat and the acquisition of more points for Tenma. Akane praises the young man with a relieved smile upon seeing that the danger has finally passed. A radiant light appears and delivers the legendary Jewel of Aldoria as a reward. Tenma holds the valuable diamond containing the soul of an ancient queen in his hands. Akane runs off in concern for the others, while Tenma hesitates to follow the group. The girl believes that their companions are safe if they used healing items. Arriving at the location, they spot a strange presence and become alert. Masayoshi Yakumo lies fallen and defeated on the blood-stained ground. The killer is amused to see that the pair defeated the Sphinx and Golem alone. Riku Himuro demands the demonic source and threatens to kill them if they resist. Nearby, Jin Yozaki's lifeless body confirms the villain's massacre. Akane enters a state of shock and terror upon seeing her former companions dead. Tenma immediately deduces that Black Knot's Hiroki Igarashi sent the killer. The killer is surprised to see that the boy knows the criminal guild. Tenma confirms that he has the cube and challenges the enemy to take it by force. The protagonist decides to draw the madman's attention to protect her from danger. Riku assumes that Tenma is exhausted and decides to kill him before focusing on the girl. Tenma turns to Akane and bluntly asks whether she has the courage to kill the man. He reminds her that becoming a true hero requires confronting killers. The young man gravely declares that no one saves the world without getting their hands dirty. Riku lets out an insane laugh and charges with everything he has, ready for the massacre. Tenma activates level 11 perception and tracks every inch of his rival's movement. With his agility and martial arts at their peak, he easily evades the attacks. The protagonist counterattacks with an acrobatic movement and strikes his opponent head-on. Riku is thrown backward but quickly recovers and charges furiously. The villain screams in fury and promises to tear Tenma apart. Before finishing the young woman, Tenma concludes that he cannot allow the dangerous psychopath to leave alive. The slash of blue energy strikes the killer's throat with extreme precision. The Tsukishiro-style straight line slash cuts through the enemy without giving him any chance to defend himself. Tenma calmly sheathes his blade as his opponent's defeated body falls. Akane questions the young man's death, but Tenma counters that he was a merciless monster. Tenma reflects that the two dead men had not become the villains of the future. The young man silently wonders whether their fates would have been different if they had remained together. He calls for Akane to leave and says that the dungeon mission is over. Outside the dungeon, several suited agents wait near the cars. Upon seeing the pair emerge, the guild members celebrate the gate's closure. A guild agent welcomes the pair and informs them that Sengoku is outside the country. Tenma hands over the Jewel of Eldoria and completes the mission's primary objective. The man confirms the valuable item and asks about the other team members. The young man coldly replies that everyone else died during the confrontation. A system notification appears floating before the protagonist's eyes. The message indicates that only 2 more demonic sources remain for the objective. Tenma knows that he will need Sengoku's help to find the remaining items. A cane unexpectedly approaches and gives him a mysterious green box as a gift. She thanks him for saving her and says that the locked box should be worth a good price. Back home, Tenma sits on his bed, ready to examine the reward. The mysterious C-rank box promises to grant a random item to whoever opens it. The protagonist finds it curious to receive a valuable item from the famous Phantom Thief. At that moment, the magical key he took from Gondo begins resonating in his pocket. The mana crystal key glows softly, ready to unlock the clasp. Tenma inserts the golden key into the lock, curious to discover the hidden contents. The chest opens and releases an intense reddish glow throughout the room. Inside the box appears a refined vial containing a reddish potion. The system reveals that unicorn blood can awaken an item's hidden power. Tenma remembers the defense ring that belonged to a powerful commander in the past. The growth-type ring is sealed and unable to display its true strength. The young man decides to drip the mysterious liquid onto the jewel to unlock its potential. The accessory absorbs the mystical potion and releases its true power in a brilliant flash. A notification confirms the item's evolution into the super, rare, rank invincible ring. Elsewhere in the city, loud laughter echoes inside a luxurious apartment. Two sisters chat casually, and one mocks Yuna for being rejected. Yuna Sherigan drinks in frustration, unable to understand why the young man still has not called her. Her sister recalls that the boy was incredible when he predicted and cleared the irregular gate. Yuna hides that she nearly lost her life to avoid worrying her overprotective sister. The young woman mentions the Silver Wing Guild's upcoming hunter selection exam. Her sister insists that Yuna gather her courage and call him directly. She suggests buying dinner for everyone so she can finally meet the young man. Yuna refuses, completely embarrassed by the idea of asking him out. Her older sister reveals her intention to officially recruit him into their guild. The next day, Tenma calmly arrives in the Artisans' Street District. He walks among the forges and nostalgically notices that the place remains identical. The protagonist's phone vibrates with an unexpected bank notification. Sengoku transfers 12 million yen for the reward and the crystals sold during the incursion. Tenma knows that this amount is still insufficient to assemble his ideal equipment set. Suddenly, aggressive demands for payment echo out and draw the protagonist's attention. A violent debt collector beats a man on the ground and demands payment of a debt. Tenma notices from his clothes that the beaten victim is one of the local blacksmiths. The young man's eyes widen when he recognizes who is truly lying on the ground. The attacker raises a piece of wood, determined to end the artisan's life. Tenma approaches in complete silence and firmly touches the brute's shoulder. The protagonist asks for a word while the man turns around in surprise and fury. Wasting no time, Tenma delivers a devastating punch directly to the bully's face. The force the blow hurls the debt collector away and sends him crashing into a stone monument. Tenma crouches before the young blacksmith and says that it is a great honor to meet him. This artisan is the legendary creator who will forge the world's most overpowered items in the future. Aware of Koji Mochizuki's talent, the protagonist decides to form a strong bond with him. Tenma reaches out to help the young man, knowing that he is the only person capable of creating growth items. The two walk together to the workshop, which is filled with materials and forging equipment. Tenma enters and calmly asks why they were beating the young man that way. Koji shamefully tries to downplay the situation's severity, but the protagonist is not fooled. The young blacksmith explains that the Cyan Guild appeared 1 year ago and offered loans to the artisans. He reveals that the guild leader uses abusive contracts to enslave every blacksmith on the street. Seeing Koji smile innocently, Tenma realizes that he is still as crazy as he was in the past. A memory from the future appears, showing the legendary artisan being dragged away in chains by guards. At the time, the old blacksmith desperately cried out about his desire to continue forging his items. He desperately begged to recover the old hammer he had left behind. The surrounding people merely mocked the man's madness, without understanding his true value. The artisan desperately clung to the clothes of passersby and begged for his tool. He tearfully claimed that his hammer awaited him in the dark corner of an old warehouse. The soldiers forcibly dragged him away and completely ignored the blacksmith's passionate pleas. Tenma recalls that everyone in the past considered the genius nothing more than a poor madman. At the time, people said that he was arrested for stealing jewels to forge equipment. The protagonist realizes that the old blacksmith's delusions were the absolute truth. Back in the present, Tenma asks about the whereabouts of the ancient hammer mentioned in the legend. Koji is surprised by the question and admits that the loan shark Oshino confiscated the tool. Tenma concludes that the situation has become complicated because he needs the hammer to commission the item. Koji says that he can only recover the tool by paying off the debt, and Tenma asks for the total amount. The blacksmith reveals that he owes 10 million yen, leaving the protagonist completely shocked. Tenma explains that he came there solely to commission a special piece of equipment. Koji sadly says that accepting the request will be impossible without his working tools. The artisan freezes in terror upon hearing heavy footsteps approaching the workshop again. Oshino storms in with his gang, ready to collect from the young blacksmith. The henchman who was beaten earlier points at Tenma and reports the assault to his boss. He accuses the protagonist of violently interfering in the guild's business. Oshino arrogantly stares at Tenma and demands to know why he attacked his subordinates. Armed bullies surround the pair and intimidate any attempt to escape or resist. The leader tells the boy to leave immediately if he does not want to lose his life right there. Tenma observes the loan shark's face with a strong feeling that he has seen him in the past. The protagonist activates memory search to identify the man. He remembers a conversation with Sengoku about various people, trying to flatter the prominent figure, remembering the man's exact connections. Tenma takes out his phone to make a call. The criminals tell him to leave, while the young man merely waits for someone to answer. Tenma calmly asks for a favor to resolve the unpleasant situation with the rival guild. Oshino is irritated by the boy's audacity in speaking on the phone directly before him. The boss orders his henchmen to advance and teach the young man an unforgettable lesson. Tenma holds out the phone and calmly says that the person on the line wants to speak with the leader. Oshino takes the device and scoffs at the unknown young man's confident attitude. The legendary Kyosuke Sengoku's voice comes through the other end, leaving the loan shark speechless. In complete desperation, Oshino turns pale and immediately agrees to every order. The leader shouts furiously and orders his henchmen to release the young artisan at once. Trembling with fear, Oshino returns the phone and apologizes for not knowing about his connection to Sengoku. He then places the confiscated old wooden hammer directly into Tenma's hands. Tenma holds the worn tool and checks whether it is the legendary hammer from the past. The protagonist reaches into his pocket to retrieve the remaining mystical vial. He notices that several precious drops of unicorn blood remain inside the container. Tenma drips the sacred liquid onto the ancient hammer to awaken its hidden power. The ancient hammer absorbs the mystical blood and awakens its true legendary form of Daedalus. Tenma holds the powerful tool as it radiates an intense reddish glow. Koji Mochizuki is amazed and speechless upon seeing his hammer completely restored. The young blacksmith asks in confusion why the protagonist did this for him. Tenma raises the hammer and recalls that the settled debt amounted to 10 million yen. The young man calmly explains that paying the amount means the tool now belongs to him. Koji becomes desperate and begs to hold the legendary hammer once more. Seeing the artisan's obsession, Tenma gives a confident smile before making his proposal. He presents a contract offering Koji an official position working under his orders. Without a second thought, The young blacksmith snatches the papers from the protagonist's hands. Koji immediately signs the document with unwavering determination in his eyes. Tenma tosses the legendary hammer through the air directly into his new partner's hands. The artisan holds the tool beside his anvil, overflowing with happiness. Ashino interrupts the moment and reminds them that Mochizuki still has an agreement with his guild. The lone shark demands that he immediately forge every weapon they ordered. Koji rests the tool on the hot metal to explain his working conditions. The guild leader loses patience and tells the boy to start forging immediately. The blacksmith says that he needs a large C-rank mana crystal for the work. Ashino flies into a rage, saying that the deadline is passing and they risk losing the gate. Koji insists on the necessary material and gives the debt collector a headache. Tenma intervenes in the argument and asks whether the delayed gate is C rank. The protagonist offers to help with the incursion, while Ashino asks for his rank. Tenma calmly replies that he is officially classified as D rank. A short while later, the two enter the gate and find a vast plain beneath a blue sky. Ashino thinks to himself that despite being D rank, Tenma possesses considerable experience. But looking toward the hill, he is utterly shocked by the massacre before him. Tenma wields his energized blade, while surrounded by dozens of slaughtered monsters. The leader can barely believe the chasm of difference between the 2D rank hunters. The entire field is covered with the bodies of goblins, defeated within minutes. The man asks in shock whether Tenma truly eliminated the entire army by himself. Suddenly, a surviving goblin appears and leaps through the air with a sharp sword. Ashino defends himself at the last second and blocks the heavy strike with his shield. The green creature continues attacking and tries to break through his guard at any cost. Furious, the man locks his blade against the monster and searches for a lethal opening. With a precise strike, Ashino pierces the monster's chest and spills its blood onto the ground. The goblin falls dead on the grass and ends the desperate battle on that side. Exhausted and panting, Ashino laments spending all his energy against a single monster. Meanwhile, Tenma effortlessly annihilates the remaining enemies with gleaming slashes. Ashino swallows hard upon realizing that the young man is definitely more than an ordinary acquaintance of Sengoku. Back in the city, smoke from the chimneys announces the frantic pace of Mochizuki's forge. The young artisan holds the enormous red crystal, with eyes shining in excitement. Ashino crosses his arms and demands delivery of the promised weapons without any more excuses. Koji wields his legendary hammer and strikes the crystal against the anvil at high speed. Ashino is impressed by the young man's extreme concentration while forging the items. Tenma politely asks permission to speak with the blacksmith during a brief break. The protagonist gives him a note detailing the attributes he wants in his new armor. Koji pockets the paper and profoundly thanks him for the opportunity to forge with his tools. He bows respectfully and assures Tenma that he will put all his talent into crafting the pieces. Tenma happily extends his hand and says that he hopes to close many more deals in the future. The two seal the agreement with a firm handshake and begin a promising alliance. Later, night falls over the city, while Tenma rests in his apartment. The young man uses his time off to casually browse his phone. Sitting at the dining table, he finishes his meal while examining his resources. With more than 1,000 accumulated points, he can finally purchase a special potion from the shop. Confident in the causality item's power, Tenma makes the purchase without hesitation. The mystical blue bottle grants the ability to acquire new techniques for 1 hour. Tenma drinks all its contents, curious to discover which technique will awaken. The young man grimaces in disgust at the magical liquid's horrible taste. A small, gleaming red star emerges from the empty bottle. Tenma rises in confusion upon seeing the magical creature floating through the room. The bright little star stops above the table and draws the protagonist's attention. Suddenly, the sphere of energy expands and emits a blinding red light. The creature grows to a colossal size and becomes a giant being directly before Tenma. The gleaming monster opens a gigantic mouth and sucks in everything around it. With no time to react, Tenma is swallowed by the entity with a terrified scream. The protagonist plummets in free fall through a red-dimensional abyss. He screams desperately, unable to understand where the darkness is taking him. Tenma hits the floor of an empty room, with sword in hand as the portal closes. The young man braces himself against the ground in confusion and tries to understand where he landed. The system recognizes the talentless trait and unlocks the transcendent space. A survival quest appears and demands that he reach level 11 or die. Tenma is alarmed to see that the probability of failure and death is 56%. The trial begins immediately with a thunderous explosion that fills the room with smoke. A wooden puppet with glowing, threatening eyes emerges from the rebel. The mannequin assumes a combat stance and cracks the entire floor with its strength. The creature clenches its fists, ready to attack with extreme violence. The puppet launches itself from the wall in an aerial charge toward the protagonist. The opponent attacks at absurd speed and slices through the air like a missile. Tenma is hurled into the rebel and coughs from the devastating impact. The young man grits his teeth, outraged by the mannequin's unbelievable speed. The puppet leaps in every direction and creates multiple trails of light throughout the room. It plummets from the ceiling and crashes onto the floor with its full weight. The mannequin charges at high speed, ready to crush Tenma once and for all. Tenma tries to parry the strike with his unique slash, releasing a trail of blue energy. The technique fails to stop the enemy, which advances and punches him directly in the face. The blow's impact brutally crushes the stone wall behind the protagonist. The mannequin unleashes a fierce sequence of punches and forces Tenma to defend himself. His level 10 resistance skill absorbs the damage and accumulates a great amount of experience. Resistance reaches level 11 with the limit break and stops the enemy's blow. A message confirms that damage reduction has been unlocked and announces the beginning of the next phase. The puppet becomes completely paralyzed, surprising Tenma with the sudden end of its attacks. The young man deduces that the trial advances as he evolves his basic abilities to their peak. Green claws armed with gigantic cleavers begin climbing the room's walls. A wild pack of murderous monsters appears and charges with a thirst for blood. Tenma wields his blue blade and cuts down the charging creatures without hesitation. The system attempts to measure the protagonist's aptitude, but is unable to analyze his talent. Tenma coldly remembers that he never possessed talent and survived through sheer effort alone. He activates level 10 intimidation and paralyzes every monster with his sinister aura. Switching to the spear, he fires a bolt of energy that obliterates the enemies. Shadows from the past echo in Tenma's mind and mock his lack of talent as a hunter. Tenma remembers the humiliations of the past, when people said effort only works for those with talent. He refuses to lose everything again, as he did in his previous life simply because he lacks talent. With a single cutting sword strike, Tenma promises to protect everything he loves during this new chance. The blue trail of energy crosses the field and rapidly cuts apart dozens of monsters. The ground becomes covered with slaughtered monsters, while Tenma remains firm with sword in hand. A message appears and announces that his intimidation skill has reached level 11. He delivers an accurate attack and eliminates the final monster with one clean, lethal movement. Exhausted, Tenma sits on the ground after seeing that every basic ability was integrated at level 11. He observes the notification and tries to understand how the new integrated ability works. The system window reveals an enormous increase in the speed of unlocking rare abilities. Tenma smiles in relief after confirming the talent. Acquisition potions impressive effects. The dimensional space dissolves and returns the young man to his apartment's living room. He collapses onto the floor and relaxes after evolving within minutes, something that would have taken several months. Picking up his phone, Tenma assumes that the magical potion's time limit must have already expired. However, He is startled to realize that the time on his phone has not advanced by even 1 minute. The protagonist's eyes widen as he deduces something surprising about the mysterious potion. He quickly rises, suspecting that the learning effect remains active. Looking toward the door, he notices the small, star-shaped creature glowing in the corridor. The brilliant entity seems to call him, indicating that the magical effect is still working. Suddenly, the intercom alarm sounds and announces a gate invasion in the neighboring area. The emergency system warns every resident to evacuate to the nearest shelter. Tenma runs through the corridor, following the star that guides him directly to the disaster site. Arriving on the street, he finds a gigantic dimensional gate spewing flames into the darkness. Brutal, gigantic beasts fall from the rift and roar furiously as they spread destruction. The hunters fight desperately and try to contain the creatures advancing through the perimeter. The young man quickens his pace upon realizing that the red glow has a very clear destination. He advances swiftly while intense flashes of magical energy illuminate the route. Yuki Shirogane appears amid the battle and releases an impressive aura of power. Tenma approaches, and the young assistant is surprised to recognize him at the invasion site. The young man recalls the promised meal, while the girl eyes him with some suspicion. A warning shout echoes moments before a flaming explosion strikes the combatants. A colossal horned monster roars and breathes a torrent of fire over the team. Yuki prepares colossal arrows in her bow and says that introductions can wait. The archer leaps with extreme agility and fires magical projectiles at the beast. The attack strikes the flaming creature head on and creates a thunderous impact. The girl asks them to handle the smaller monsters while her sister faces the giant leader. At that moment, the small red star stops and shines directly above the young assistant's head. Tenma deduces that the potion is indicating he should help the girl in the battle. A swift monster violently hits one of the hunters and sends the man flying through the air. The combatant crashes hard into the ground, only a few yards from Tenma and his partner. Gravely wounded, the hunter begs for help, while the mystical glow points toward him. A bloodthirsty beast rapidly advances, ready to deliver the fatal blow to the fallen warrior. Tenma swiftly lunges forward and rescues the injured man moments before the deadly attack. While carrying the wounded ally, the system confirms the rapid evolution of his new rescue technique. Rescue reaches level 10, granting increased attributes and minor healing to the target. The hunter profoundly thanks him upon feeling the technique heal his wounds. Tenma asks about the confrontation's risks, and she confidently says that she just reached B rank. The protagonist smiles and thanks her for her concern, reminding her that even as D rank, he can handle himself. New monstrous beasts appear and charge furiously toward the young combatants. The young woman prepares magical orbs and firmly orders D rank hunters to remain in support. The girl is alarmed to see Tenma advance alone toward the danger. The red star guides the young man directly into an enormous fiery explosion. Tenma is confused to realize that he must enter the flames instead of trying to dodge them. His companion desperately shouts and tries to stop the protagonist's madness. Passing through the fire causes the system to activate and rapidly evolve fire resistance. Fire resistance reaches level 10 and makes the young man immune to heat damage. He unleashes a devastating horizontal slash and slices through the monster before him. Tenma then leaps high and prepares a deadly thrust with his weapon. He comes down with extreme violence and opens a precise cut along the creature's back. The monster roars in pain as the attack's devastating impact crushes it. Tenma activates level 10 weapon switch as he lands after the impact. Several brutal beasts advance, and he notices that they are even more durable than they appeared. He rapidly strikes with the spear and accumulates consecutive levels in his proficiency with the weapon. His spearman skill continues rising frantically with every accurate blow he delivers. Tenma reaches level 10 with the spear and easily finishes the group of monsters. Girl asks when he learned to use spears, and the young man replies that he learned just now. The allies panic upon seeing an enormous new horde advance all at once. The furious beasts charge in a mass, ready to trample the defensive lines. A storm of blazing magical arrows rains from the sky upon the monsters. The energy shots pierce the creatures and wipe out the beasts in the blink of an eye. The giant monster falls defeated onto the rebel and ends the area's primary threat. Yuki Sharigain stands imposingly and displays the overwhelming power of an elite huntress. Tenma watches in amazement and acknowledges the tremendous strength of a top warrior. Yuki announces that she will enter the gate to defeat the boss while the others clear the area. The woman invites Manhwa and Tenma to accompany her, leaving the assistant indignant. Tenma smiles and touches the girl's shoulder, inviting her to go with them without wasting time. Thoroughly embarrassed, Manhwa accepts while Tenma follows the little star that continues pointing toward her, crossing the rift into a rocky landscape. Yuki remarks that they can now have a proper conversation. She extends her hand to Tenma and says that she heard a great deal of praise from her younger sister. The young man shakes the huntress's hand and wonders whether the meeting is also the potion's doing. A red notification appears and warns that they have entered demonic territory. The system announces that a curse prevents any being inside the gate from recovering. Manhwa is confused by the warning about demons, while Tenma grows concerned about the situation. Tenma asks whether the previous monster is also there, and Yuki says that they need to investigate. The magical restrictions prove to the young man that a true demon and its servants are in the area. He knows that corrupted humans receive fragments of dark power when they make pacts with demons. Yuki tells the two to watch the entrance and prevent escapes, while she advances alone toward the nest. Tenma warns that the restriction completely blocks the recovery of stamina, mana, and health. Yuki conjures a small magical spark in her hand to test the curse's effect. The woman is startled to notice that her energy bar truly is not regenerating. She thanks him for the crucial warning and charges away with a radiant combat aura. Manhwa tries to follow in concern, but the archer has already disappeared into the dust. Tenma asks her to remain calm and reminds her of an S-rank huntress's strength, but the girl responds irritably. Suddenly, Tenma senses an unusual presence moving nearby. Looking toward the horizon, he notices the red star pointing at a deserted location. He activates level 11 perception, but still cannot sense any presence there. Manhwa asks whether something is there while Tenma decides to trust the star's guidance. The young man throws his blue energy spear into the empty terrain with all his strength. The attack strikes a hidden barrier head on and draws a cry of pain from the middle of nowhere. Upon impact, a dark, covered magical book falls open and smoking onto the ground. Manhwa is stunned to witness a hidden presence reveal itself after Tenma's attack. Tenma's eyes shine intensely as he focuses on the mysterious being. The system issues several notifications and rapidly raises his discernment proficiency. The ability reaches level 10 and exposes a giant golden goblin holding its wounded chest. The monster smirks and loudly asks how the human managed to discover it. Manhwa is alarmed to see a talking monster, and Tenma considers that it might be another demonic servant. Scratching its ear, the creature complains about its bad luck and reveals itself as the golden goblin Zabel. Tenma and Manhwa stare at the fearsome golden goblin while remaining on guard across the rocky terrain. Furious, the monster demands to know how a human discovered that hiding place. Tenma wields his sword and realizes that his previous attack did not even scratch his opponent. The small red star once again floats, directly above the book lying on the ground. Manhwa points out that the creature dropped the mysterious tome after the spear struck it. Without hesitation, the young man reaches out to collect the dark tome from the ground. Picking up the item, he discovers that he is holding a source of power from the demonic world. Zabel summons his servants and demands that the human return the sacred item immediately. Tenma swallows hard and thinks that he must eliminate the leader to neutralize the danger. He remembers that in the future, this named monster would become the dreaded Goblin King. Even though the monster is not yet a king, the recovery restriction makes the battle risky. The goblin leader raises an arm and fires an overwhelming wave of purple mental magic. The young assistant raises a spatial isolation barrier to protect them from the spell. The creature promises them a painless death if they willingly hand over the book. Tenma calculates their disadvantage and decides to devise a plan before the barrier breaks. He asks the girl to run and find her sister, while he holds off the leader alone. Manhwa agrees to the plan and prepares to seek reinforcements at high speed. The protagonist remains alone on the battlefield and calmly wields his blade. The monster mocks him and wants to see how long the young man can endure without the protective shield. A brainwashing mental spell begins invading and corroding the young hunter's mind. Tenma lowers his head and appears to have completely succumbed to the evil spell's control. Zabel confidently approaches and reaches out to take the tome from the boy's hands. Suddenly, Tenma's eyes widen and reveal ruthless focus. In the blink of an eye, he charges and delivers a frontal straight line slash with his sword. The devastating blow strikes the golden goblin and hurls its heavy body away. His level 11 mental strength nullifies the curse, while Tenma mocks the monster's nigh Vade. The attack's impact tears through the ground and leaves a trail of annihilated goblins. Zabel rises in fury, unable to understand how a simple human resisted his mental magic. Tenma grits his teeth in frustration upon seeing that the blow was far too shallow to defeat the leader. The goblin pounds its chest and boasts of possessing the greatest physical defense among its entire species. Tenma tries to activate a healing technique and becomes enveloped in a faint emerald light. The system blocks the healing, and the young man realizes that he will be defeated if the battle drags on. Tenma calls the enemy by its proper name, completely unsettling the monster. The young man mocks the opponent to destabilize it, and uses his prior knowledge to his advantage. The goblin begins suspecting that the human is actually a demon worshipper. Tenma confirms the deception and immediately gains levels in his deceptive acting ability. The goblin leader demands that the young man show proof of the demonic power he received. Tenma asserts authority and orders the monster to reveal its true objective inside the gate. Suspicious, the monster concentrates a flaming sphere and refuses to speak without proof. Surrounded by assassins, Zabel demands the forbidden book's immediate return. Realizing that the bluff failed, Tenma prepares to settle the confrontation with his blade. A line of blue light cuts through the air at high speed and aims directly for the monster's neck. Tenma executes a straight line strike and shatters the goblins attempting to protect him. Zabel parries the blow with its claws and notices that the young man aimed solely at its vital point. The monster hatefully declares that it no longer cares whether the young man serves the demons. 4 goblin assassins leap from the shadows and attack together with lethal daggers. Level 10 discernment activates, and Tenma anticipates the aerial assault. Magical stars reveal the enemy's weak points while the blue sword slices through the air. In a flawless sequence of slashes, Tenma cuts apart every attacker at once. Landing on the rebel, Tenma searches for the goblin leader and realizes that it vanished. Suddenly, the red star shines intensely and warns the young man of a new attack. Zabel appears by surprise and delivers a devastating blow that collides with Tenma's blade. The monster is astonished to see its stealth attack completely intercepted by the human. Tenma activates weapon switch, and an enormous blue flaming spear appears in his hands. With an agile movement, the protagonist counterattacks and hurls the goblin leader through the air. Furious in midair, the monster curses and concentrates an immense sphere of dark magic. The purple mist expands through the area and blocks all vision around the young man. Enveloped in darkness, Tenma realizes that he has lost his sight and activates weapon switch again. The small red star indicates the exact location where he must deliver his strike. Tenma's gaze intensifies with a scarlet glow as he prepares to attack. Discernment guides his precise thrust directly into the hidden monster. Zabel is struck head on and violently plummets into the ground. A notification confirms that his discernment skill has just risen to level 11. The bonus grants absolute certainty of nullifying any rare invisibility technique. Zabel is shocked to see its maximum stealth undone by a mere human hunter. Wasting no time, Tenma charges at high speed and lands another brutal blow on his opponent. Switching to the energized sword, the protagonist prepares to finish the goblin leader. A relentless sequence of successive slashes strikes Zabel's body with extreme precision. Unable to react, the creature despairs and begs for the attacks to stop. The impact crushes an enormous crater into the terrain and leaves the goblin completely helpless. In pain, the monster admits that it has been a very long time since someone beat it that badly. Panting, Tenma tries to catch his breath, while the goblin mocks the young man's exhaustion. Zabel reminds him that the recovery restriction will condemn the young hunter to total exhaustion. Tenma grows concerned upon realizing that the reinforcements are taking longer than expected. Suddenly, a reddish light begins pulsing intensely inside his coat pocket. The young man places a hand on his chest to check what is radiating the sudden heat. The system identifies unicorn blood as an item capable of restoring an original state. Placing complete trust in the magical guide, Tenma drinks the bottle to restore all his vigor. Zabel laughs and mocks the human's futile attempt to use a recovery potion. However, Tenma leaps into the sky and releases an impressive column of spiritual energy. He plummets in a straight line and delivers a crushing downward slash. The goblin leader is hit and is shocked, unable to understand where so much physical vigor came from. The item reversed his physical condition to its pre-battle state while preserving every technique. Tenma deduces that the monster's golden carapace consumes absurd amounts of mana. With spear in hand, Tenma challenges his opponent to see which of them will exhaust their energy first. The monster begins to weaken as it feels its magical reserves reach a critical limit. Desperate, the monster decides to bet everything on its most powerful spell to end the battle. Colossal sphere of red demonic energy forms above the young hunter. Zabel fires the devastating attack and furiously declares that playtime is over. A gigantic wave of reddish destruction advances and tears through the rocky ground. The detonation consumes the terrain and raises a massive column of blazing smoke. The monster gives an evil smile, firmly believing that it vaporized its opponent. Amid the impact, Tenma realizes that the magical projectiles continue homing in on him. In midair, the young man realizes that he must deflect the attacks before the spell swallows him. The goblin roars madly and pours out all its mana to crush the hunter. Tenma activates the level 11 straight line slash and concentrates a blade of pure energy. The colossal slash collides with the red sphere and splits the demonic magic in half. Zabel is hurled backward in panic upon seeing his ultimate attack destroyed with one blow. Tenma activates weapon switch and dives from the heavens like a lethal bolt toward his enemy. The spear violently pierces the monster and crushes its body against the bottom of the crater. The monster smirks and claims that all the effort will be useless. Tenma grits his teeth in frustration upon seeing that the goblin's defense is nearly impenetrable. The small red star appears and indicates a weak point directly in the center of the creature's chest. Tenma steps back and activates weapon switch, preparing to strike the indicated location. He unleashes the sword's ability and summons a colossal torrent of blue spiritual energy. The system temporarily and drastically increases the strike's range and destructive power. The young man drives the energized blade into the monster's vulnerable point with all his strength. Zabel coughs up blood in shock while trying to withstand the warrior's overwhelming attack. The monster's eyes widen in panic when it feels its impenetrable defense begin to yield. The insane experience multiplier causes Tenma to learn the defense penetration skill. The technique reaches level 10, and the monster roars in agony as Tenma completely overwhelms it. A massive explosion of blue energy devastates the terrain and destroys everything nearby. The dust begins to settle and reveals an enormous smoking crater in the middle of the terrain. The golden goblin's completely battered, and defeated body lies at the bottom of the rift. Tenma sheathes his blade and sighs in relief upon seeing confirmation of Zabel's death. The system announces the demonic servant's elimination and removes every gate restriction. The defeated leader drops a golden crystal that serves as the key to its treasure. Tenma retrieves the special key, certain that it will be extremely useful in the future. The young man slips the item into his pocket, while the brilliant little star draws his attention again. He picks up the demonic book, whose contents remain unknown to the system. Tenma remembers that demonic sources assume various forms, such as the sphere obtained in the past. Wasting no time, the protagonist decides to absorb the mysterious knowledge once and for all. The red droplet merges with the book and reveals that the moment of learning has arrived. He opens the dark tome, releasing a gentle emanation of forbidden magic from its pages. A radiant golden light erupts from the book and illuminates the young man's entire body. The object dissolves into pure energy and is completely assimilated through the young hunter's hand. Mystical runes appear on his wrist and confirm that the other world's power now resides within his soul. Tenma examines the mark on his arm, curious to discover what kind of ability it contains. A reddish interface calculates his accomplishments according to another dimension's rules. The system grants him a fantastic S rank evaluation for defeating a named monster. Tenma earns the accelerated growth title, which doubles all his experience gains. The young man smiles in amazement as he calculates the absurd impact this multiplier will have on his training. The small red star begins dissolving into the air after completing its purpose. Tenma says goodbye to the magical creature and mentally thanks it for helping during the mission. A notification announces that 2 of the 3 demonic sources have been successfully recovered. As a reward, he receives a pill that grants the talent of a prodigy for 1 hour. Looking at the golden crystal, Tenma reflects on how Zabel's defeat will change the future. He is certain that the monster intended to deliver that power to the true demons. Suddenly, a powerful whirlwind appears and announces the arrival of people at the location. Yuki and Manhwa arrive in concern upon seeing the battle's devastating trails across the ground. Tenma suspects that the S-rank huntress monitored his entire battle from a distance. The woman gives him a mysterious look and analyzes the young man's true potential. Tenma plays it off by saying that he barely survived, and Manhwa sighs in relief at the news. Yuki invites Tenma to a meal and says that she has important matters to discuss. Later, the group gathers at a traditional restaurant serving a hot meal. The sisters enthusiastically discuss the menu, while Tenma enjoys the delicious dish. Manhwa scolds her sister for her relaxed attitude while Tenma calmly eats. The leader asks whether the food is good, and the young man happily praises its flavor. Yuki formally thanks him for saving her sister and praises his surprising strength. Holding a card, Yuki directly asks whether Tenma is interested in joining the guild. The card reveals her position as deputy leader, and Yuki suggests that he take the guild test the following week. She guarantees that with the strength he displayed, the young man will certainly pass the recruitment test. Tenma politely refuses the invitation and explains that he does not want to become bound by guild obligations. The woman calmly regrets the decision and respects the young hunter's choice. The 2 sisters whisper in surprise about the mystery and coldness surrounding the young man's behavior. As he eats, Tenma's phone begins vibrating with a new notification. The young man opens the message and notices that the sender is none other than Kyosuke Sengoku. The text informs him that the hunter under investigation will be taking the Silver Wing Guild's test. Tenma activates memory search and recalls a major incident that occurred during the test. Memories from the past suggest that the same man may have been the mastermind behind the entire tragedy. Sengoku requests Tenma's help inside a C-rank gate in exchange for the valuable information. Faced with the discovery, Tenma changes his stance and reconsiders the proposal to join the guild. With a confident smile, the young man confirms that he will participate in the admission test the following week. The days pass in the city while preparations for the major test finally begin. In his room, Tenma opens the dimensional shop and notices that the normal consumables section is sold out. Because he purchased every basic item, the category is upgraded to rare rarity level. The rare catalog is unlocked and offers new resources as his hunter level increases. He uses a rare weapon, summoning ticket, while his luck ability activates. The effect grants an absurd amount of experience and raises luck to level 3. Tenma smiles in satisfaction as he looks upon the newly summoned legendary weapon. The young man wields the imposing spirit, destroying axe, which evolves alongside its user.